All right. Yes. Yes. I'll read in the rules of procedure. These hearings are being held in accordance of Chapter 40 of the Newcastle County Code and are being jointly conducted by the Newcastle County Department of Land Use and Newcastle County Planning Board. My name is Alec Davis, representing the Department of Land Use. Other members of the department here this evening are David Colbert, Anthony Skowski, Don Thompson, Matthew Rogers, and Eric Gashevsky. Representing the planning board tonight is Robert Snowden. Board members here this evening include Ruth Vispardis, Robert Hott, and Neil Cantrell. We'll get into the first agenda item this evening is application 2025-0486-T. Ordinance 25-101 data centers text amendment to amend Newcastle County Code Chapter 40 Unified Development Code Article 3 Use Regulations and Article 33 definitions to establish standards for the review, siting, and operations of data centers.
Good. Thank you. I'm David Carter, councilman for the 6th District, Newcastle County Council.
Adjust the mic.
I'd like the chairman and the planning board for the opportunity to present the ordinance. As introduced, as well as what I'm doing is a little bit ahead of time, providing you a draft of what looks like it may be a substitute to get your input on that as well. And what I've actually trying to accomplish with this is just the responsible siting and development of data centers, really safeguarding both the economic opportunities and the environmental integrity that they can affect, ensuring that innovation and responsible growth go hand in hand.
Dave, can you fix the mic so we can hear you? Can you fix the mic?
Thank you. Is that better?
I think so.
I don't think not loud enough.
Testing it.
You got some good stuff for us, Dave. I want to hear it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So here's what I did, next slide. So why does this matter? We are dealing with what's now become pretty much a national issue, and that's how to deal with the surging demand for digital infrastructure. It's driving the large scale data center proposals. I know through the National Association of Counties, we've been working on it for about 2 years. It is no longer a local issue. It is a regional and national issue that we've got to deal with. And a large part of it is the hyperscale data centers are really a new land use. We hadn't anticipated. But it's a new use that we had never anticipated in the current zoning code. So it really shows the critical need for us to put some parameters in, some criteria in to deal with this new unanticipated land use, largely because of its impact on land use compatibility and our responsibility for our comprehensive plan and intergovernmental coordination type stuff. Energy consumption and infrastructure, I'll talk about that in a minute. Water usage can be significant. In some cases, it's not. Noise, particularly below frequency noise that I'll talk about, and of course, air emissions. And this is why it requires really intensive updating of the zoning as well as very thoughtful intergovernmental coordination. Next slide. So the key impacts, one is land use compatibility. These facilities operate 24/7 at large footprints, of course. A major supporting infrastructure needs with power lines and generation and brain and power and other things. And frankly, have a lot of characteristics of what we have historically considered heavy industrial uses. Water use can be very significant. There are some new technologies coming out that can reduce that, but it is a concern that we wanted to have addressed. Noise pollution, both from the cooling equipment and backup generators, is very important. Low frequency noise, I'll talk about, can travel up to 2 miles. Based on the studies and dealing with that low frequency noise, is something we want to be aware of. Air emissions, particularly the backup generators, but there are other emission sources to consider. And of course, the big one, dealing with the energy impacts. Next slide. Just to give you an idea, an example, a 1 megawatt, if you look at the amount of data we can use, you look at what we've used in Delaware, and depending on how much energy efficiency they have, you can use anywhere from 8.7 to 11.2 megawatts per year, which essentially a 1 gigawatt system would be approaching the entire energy use we currently have for electricity. So the implications are really important. It does put risk on grid reliability and require major infrastructure upgrades. That is getting more complicated with several states now looking at whether or not they can change their relationship and agreements with the grid network that goes through the PJM, and can have serious impacts on climate change initiatives. So next slide. So for the goals, of course, we want to safeguard the economic opportunity and environmental integrity as we look at these new innovations and how we do them. But really what we are looking at here is updating zoning code that was established parameters that responsibly guide development and use for a new unanticipated use. This is a use that wasn't even conceptualized when we passed our zoning, and it's much more significant than even some of the things we dealt with, the logistics centers and other problems that emerged way ahead of our code updates. It is important that when we do these, we protect residential communities and natural resources, ensure compatibility with the land use and the infrastructure plans that we have. We have a comp plan, really push energy efficiency. And I think if we're going to do these, it's going to require energy efficiency improvements, not only in the data center industry, but we're going to have to do other things to improve data efficiency or other uses to be able to meet the challenges before us. We are trying to get a full disclosure of operational needs, any microgrid components and things like that, so we know ahead of time and really ensure intergovernmental coordination. Now that intergovernmental coordination, you remember, is an element that we require in a comprehensive plan. So being able to look at how we weave together our state code and our county code is really important. And it is something that we're required to do under state code in our comprehensive planning processes. Next slide. So for infrastructure and environmental standards, the energy is demonstrate coordination with, what we're asking is for demonstration coordination with energy utility and public service commission to ensure adequate energy availability. This is largely because under 1029 Delaware Code, energy supply and availability is really regulated through the Public Service Commission within the state of Delaware. What we want to do is just make sure that we're not doing things and approving things that run contrary to that. So this is a coordination mechanism. And if you look at the bus reviews, they made it very clear what the role is of the state, and the state will be the ones who make the final decisions on the energy availability. But we want to make sure it's coordinated so that we work together. When we do that as well, I think we could in Delaware, and we're going to actually build it into this mission. Same thing for water. We want disclosure of the cooling systems. We want no open loop systems, once through systems, unless they're using reclaimed water that meets certain standards. The noise, this is the first change we're going to get. Anything in yellow will be things that are being proposed in the substitute. The noise limits for DBA and DVC. DBA mimics what you hear, what your kind of hears. DVC picks up those low frequency things that actually you can almost feel it. If you've ever had a car drive by your house with this big woofer playing that deep bass, you can actually feel it. And what can happen with some of these generators and cooling systems is that travel up to 2 miles. That low frequency stuff, and for some people, they're very sensitive. So we're trying to figure out how to manage that, and it's much more difficult to mitigate than the DBA. So that's why we added that. Of course, we'll do enhanced stormwater management. We already do that for large buildings and warehouses. And we are looking at emissions and trying to figure out how to deal with the cumulative impacts, but that will be largely coordinating with the permitting program for DECRA. Next slide. So summaries, this was, I'm working through the National Association of Counties and particularly with Logan County and Fairfax County, who last year, because of the real pitch they're in with the energy budget from Dominion Energy, down in data center, the valley they have down there, where most of them are. They said the first thing to do is to make sure that you don't make it vibrate, to make it a special use, that you can look at the changing technologies, how you're dealing with it, have that checklist in 4031 430 that minimizes adverse impacts, and to make sure that you can manage it because it's a bit changing technology. Of course, the noise, this is a combination of two things. 55 decibel limits at the property line, particularly looking at low frequency mitigation to the extent that we can, and then also put setback. Keep in mind, low frequency can travel up to 2 miles, 5,200 feet per mile. This is a tenth of where that can vary, but I think we can mitigate the worst of it. Quite frankly, if you decided you wanted to go higher, I would be comfortable with that based on the science. But I think this should be the bare minimum for a good minute. The backup power, Tier 4 and natural gas with the selective catalytic reduction, that's like a catalytic converter. That's to get to those clean burning systems. You can go to natural gas. If we go to that, we have another energy issue because the choice of natural gas and what the impacts might be there, although it would be probably cleaner than the large number of these. 1 gigabyte, 1.2 gigawatt system or 1 gigawatt system, you're probably looking at, depending on the size, anywhere from 250 to 350 or 400 generators. 2 to 3 megawatts each. Microgrids are where you can have a small grid that has your power supply, your backup, might have some self-generation. They could do them just standalone in some cases. Often they're collecting from grid, and we just want to make sure that we know what the plans are and how they're going through that, so that we can coordinate with the state and make sure they're coordinated with the utilities to make that work. The other things that we did do, these really came from the plus review comments. If you look at them, that were requests from the state, is to give a much clearer definition of open loop and closed loop cooling systems, as well as they wanted us to define reclaimed water. Demonstrate coordinates in compliance with the state and federal laws. Initially, they asked us to put specifics on their regulations and code in it. We weren't comfortable with that because it's changing. For instance, ESC, right now we have a House bill and a Senate bill that are coming through, and we just want to be able to say, if you comply with the law, if that comes in and changes, we're still covered. We can have just coordinate with whatever laws exist. We did add decommissioning plans and financial assurance requirements. Rapidly changing technologies, the chips could get much smaller, they could run much cooler, they could use much less energy, and some of these large facilities may not be needed at 15. We don't know yet how quickly it's going to evolve. I think it will evolve quickly when you look at the money behind data centers, the serious problems in front of them. Usually when you've got those kind of resources, you can find technology solutions. So it will change, but we don't want to have a bunch of legacy large buildings and substations and stuff across the ground that make it harder to use that ground. It has to be decommissioned. Brownfields, that's what we're doing there. And the other thing that I am proposing is to have the effective date, be the date of the introduction of this ordinance, and base that on pending ordinance doctrine. I gave an explanation of that, as well as the the most recent court case on that for with Rehoboth. And give you an idea. Go to the next slide. So here are the definitions. I'm not going to read them. They're in the draft that you have. It is highlighted where the changes are, but these are just requests that came from the state through our plus review with our state planning coordination. Also, we had comments from the Public Service Commission under Section G and H. We are basically recommending what we see as the best technology now. They said that could improve pretty quickly. So if you're going to do that, either stay silent on it or go ahead and include it now, but allow them to have the opportunity, if they could demonstrate something more efficient and better for the environment, to change as that technology changes. So that's what this one does. Okay, the next one. This was a challenging one. The first one was easy. We have to coordinate with the water allocation program. That's in state code. We already do that. There's a subcommittee for Newcastle County. And we just want to have a demonstration that statement of coordination that does take place. These were some of the original code sections in the plus review that they asked us to incorporate. We weren't comfortable doing that. So what we said is we can have a checklist for our planners to go through and check with these agencies, make sure that all of this is being coordinated. But really left it much broader to say comply with all state and federal requirements. Okay? And that way we can coordinate if the Senate bill and House bill for the Public Service Commission pass, we will be able to have that applied to it. If they update, add more cumulative impacts generators for DNREC, for their emissions, that'll apply. So that's kind of how we do it. Next slide. This is the decommissioning and abandonment. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this. This is just making sure that there's a plan, a good cost estimate that we have. This is something that some of you have been here a while and may have seen. It was done for solar arrays in rural areas, because after they get done in 25 years, if they decide to get rid of them, we wanted to turn them back to farms. In the same way, we just don't want these giant buildings and things out there and large electric infrastructure if the technology changes and things change. Now, if they're functional, you get one built and it's profitable for 30 years, and it's not a big deal. But if it happens quicker, at least we're covered. Next slide. Also similar to the solar array stuff, we wanted the financial insurance. So we will sort of have to bond this to make sure that we can cover the cost if we have to do commission, so that the decommissioning, so the public doesn't get caught with this cleanup costs, Medicam and some other areas. Okay. Next slide. This is the pending ordinance doctrine. I encourage you to read the court case that I sent to you, as well as the other information. I'm sure some people will be concerned about this, but this basically is typically done when you are concerned about people putting in applications to get in under the new parameters or new criteria. We do have one active plan already. There is discussion of several others that have been shared with me. I just think if we're going to come, we need to have good, thoughtful parameters in our code to do. So this is the way to do it, and this is the court case that reconfirmed it through the Supreme Court. Unless the Delaware Supreme Court does it, I think it's standing law. So you can go to the next slide. This is just verbatim out of the code. There will be one change in this, and that will be to go from July 29th, probably to August 5th. July 29th really was the introduction date, and the council said we should probably make it August 5th is the actual introduction date if we go there. Aside from that, I did share with you a document that I got out today that looks at some things that I have been hearing at least secondhand concerns about for designations for data centers or from being special use and why. So I wrote something up that gave you my rationale and my regulated intent of why I've done that. So you have to be very clear for you not to have to guess. It's in writing. You have it. Coordination with state and federal agencies. There's been some question of duplicating state agencies. That has not happened. Trust me, I know the state law as well or better than I know the county law. I've worked in the state for 28 years. And you have to expect those laws as well. You have, again, that is 4 pages long. I apologize for that. But the specifics of each of those major programs are included that specifically talks to both my rationale and my legislative intent going through it. And then low frequency noise, a few of the studies that I looked at. The best data that we're seeing right now is coming out of Europe. We're not doing as much research, I think, in the States. A lot of our noise barriers are based on the old EPA studies. That office was closed in 1981. As we were doing a lot of reconditioning after President Reagan came into office. They did even in that those cite the problem of low frequency noises. So with that, go to the next slide, and I think we can go to any questions the board may have.
I think for the public benefit, could you provide an explanation of the no by right and what a special use permit is?
So
what that process is?
So no by right, basically in special use requires normally by right, if we meet all the parameters of code, it's just approved. We have to approve it. It's an administrative vote for us. When you make it special use, it has to go through the Board of Variance, Board of Adjustments. There is a specific table that you look up the criteria. It has to be things like minimize impact and other things. We did that for heavy industry when we passed the landfill ordinance in the past. And as you'll see in my description, there are good reasons, probably better reasons to do it here than anywhere else because of the changing nature of this technology and the uncertainty of our grid reliability and energy generation. So it really makes sense for us to tie all of that together and give it a much deeper consideration. Plus, this is a new use in our area. We don't quite know what the compatibility impacts are going to be with our comprehensive plan, so it makes sense.
So each project that we plan must go through the process of special use permit.
Yes. And let's get off this easier, I just overwhelm you with piece of work.
But I guess the other one I would have is the, in the revisions that you got in yellow, those get more into the detail of the interagency coordination with the state.
They do.
So-
And I mean, they were, we do intercom plan, we have interagency coordination. Under our state code, we have the Hustle land use planning that we have to coordinate and go through the particular land use service process. We went through that. They gave us a very detailed conversation. We had follow-up meetings with Generac on it, more clarification. So the bulk of those came out of that intergovernmental coordination because there are major things environmentally that the state does and the energy the state does. And then there are major things that we need to be doing in the land use arena. And for something this important, both because of the huge economic opportunity it presents, as well as the potential problems it can present, we need to make sure that we do, I think, state county coordination at a level that we have never done. State and wish we did better. Maybe this will be a prototype of how we move forward in the future of doing it. Just really.
And that includes the Public Service Commission.
Yes, it does.
Input and concurrence, I guess,
Yes.
for each one, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And you will see in the plus comments, the specific comments from Generac, from Public Service Commission, from the Fire Marshal particularly, but if there are other codes that we get captured by state, we need the state code. So both things are passed by the General Assembly, new regulations that emerge that affect this use, they will automatically be brought into.
Anything else on the board? Yes, sir.
Do we know what the average lifespan of a data center is at this point?
We used to. But what's happening right now, and I know I work this closely with Mike Turner, Supervisor Mike Turner, Captain. Phyllis Randall, who's the president of their supervisor, which is their equivalent of council. They have over 200 data centers, largest bandwidth. It's been a boom for years, and they're the richest county in the country. They have 117 proposed data centers. That's the reason they had to go to restricting rural by right, because Dominion Energy has put them on an energy budget. Right now, not only the new data centers, but the existing data centers that are trying to upgrade to the new chips are using 4 to 10 times more energy. And it's clear that they will not even meet the energy requirements for their existing data centers in Virginia. Unless something drastic changes or the technology changes. So they were the first ones to raise to me some discussions that we had in National Association of Counties that we need. So I wish I could give you a tighter answer, but I think we need to do our due diligence. I believe as a county government and our code and look at this very hard. There's a lot of uncertainty where this industry's going.
I guess you would say that Newcastle County benefits from Loudoun County's experiences and the input in this.
And Fairfax and a few others that have worked with this. What we basically started 2 years ago. I serve on the board of directors for the National Association of Counties. We come together nationally 4 times a year. This is an issue we're dealing with. I had a legislation direct other part of written. And then there was a large meeting in Delaware City. I wanted to just have more time to work on it. That's why you have to substitute. But quite frankly, at the end of that meeting, General Manager Parker said, "We better get your ordinance in now." So we did it as a special meeting. I wish I had a little more time. I would have loved to work more with the impacted communities and stuff, but this is moving fast. Absolutely. In fact, I'm flying out to Milwaukee tomorrow for another National Association meeting, and most of my day Thursday is going to be with a group of counties around the country that are struggling with this issue, and we're just going to see. So what I did was listen to everything and basically asked Mike and Phyllis and their staff. So if you had to start all over, what would you want in place for the meeting? And that's where I started with ordinance.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I just wanted to, talk a little bit about the special use. This is obviously new technology. Kind of liken it to, a new car. You don't want to drive it without putting your seatbelt on or having good brakes. So, specifically, the low frequency noise that there's a couple mentioned in here of studies and residents reporting 1 to 2 miles, yet we're only looking at 1,000-foot setback. How can we balance that with the protection of the people who are going to be within 1 to 2 miles? Can, should.
This is the one area I don't have a good answer to. And I was trying to look at what I thought.
Can you repeat the question so that we can hear what
Oh.
you asked?
So he asked, particularly low frequency, that we know can travel up to 1 or 2 miles. It's going to dissipate as it goes. The worst is going to be closer. A lot of jurisdictions have, that I've talked to in counties, have 200 and 500 feet, all of which are kind of telling me that's still pending a whole lot of complaints. So the science to me indicates that it probably takes more. I don't know if technologies to get fire will come in and other things that we can find ways to use the generators or go to other generators or better pulling systems. I think that will come in time. So that one was a political compromise, to be honest with you, that isn't totally aligned in my view with the science. I mean, my background was in science before that, policy. Well, I don't know, that's a hard one to balance. And I can tell you that you're probably going to hear a lot of communities or a lot of development interest, and they're going to be very upset about it. As a foot setback, if that's what they're planning for warehouses and other things as well. I think it's sort of inevitable. But yeah, I cited the science, some of the studies there. I have other ones that after Friday I can send it to you. One before Friday I can get it to you. After that, it'll be expert communication next week.
Rick Resort, I have a question on the same thing. This 1,000-foot minimum from residential zones. What do they mean by zones? Is that the whole?
So if you have a parcel zone residential, that's our.
So if there's a residential zone that nothing was built on.
Yeah.
That still counts as, okay,
Yes.
so it's not a house. it's just a-
But right now, I mean, the sites that I looked at, the current site being considered is about 1,200 feet per meters.
1,000.
Well, the nearest existing one. And then I looked at, the only logical place I can see that. Build a data center was Edgewater, which you have Calpine next to it, but have a state center. Yes, turbines to share the battery and we can pull water from the treatment plant, and it's over 1,000 feet. So it's 55,000 at the Sandy parcel line and go across that. And from where the building is, where the structure, the facility, it's 1,000 feet.
Thank you.
One last follow-up, Cantrip. I see there's a berm requirement in there. Does that mitigate any of I mean, the normal frequency probably, yes.
Most of the peer review literature I'm looking at, shows that it does penetrate. It does the low frequency and penetrates buildings. I think it would dissipate some. The burn requirement is really, you know, if you look at special use, you look at the aesthetic impact and those things, so that helps with that. The trees helps with that. They will definitely help with the face noise that you get with DVA. What you hear definitely will reduce that. I think it will dissipate some of the low frequency. I don't know that it won't do nearly as good of a job BBC recorded stuff.
Other question? While on this topic, have a quick step back. What's the impact on air quality of running the number of generators you might need to run? You have a situation where you need to use some backup power that would be showing as well. If I was a citizen within 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000, what's my air quality would be for all those generators that run into one pump? Have you looked at that?
I have. Obviously, Demrec has. Demrec is working on it. They were concerned if we went to megawatt of generation that would exceed all the trading allowances we have in the state of Delaware. Nitrogen oxide. You know, I mean, you are talking about, I think, 250 to 400 generators for 1 gigawatt building as an example. That's probably 600 gallons of diesel per hour. If it's natural gas, it's less, but then you have energy impact. So, but fortunately, that is under the purview under state law.
Okay, I hear you.
So when we talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about coordination with the state and county. Right, and the plus review, I don't know if everybody in this room understands what the plus review is. Maybe you could explain that real quickly. And in addition, let's do that first.
So the plus review is under state code. All municipalities that do land use. When you have major text amendments to your legislation, major development plans. In order to make sure it's coordinated with state infrastructure and state impacts and state programs, the State Office of Planning has you come down and present it to them, and then they have all of the key states, Delta, historic preservation. In this case, it was the first time, as I requested, they had Public Service Commission. So you present, they all sit around the table, they hear it, they ask questions just like you're asking right now. They give you their initial comments, and then similar to what you all do for a report later, when you mull over a little bit, they send us written comments. In this case, we got written comments. It was more intensive in the level of state and local coordination than typically occurs. So we set up a separate meeting with them to get that clarification, largely because I was thinking about grading, as they said, and putting the state references to the regulations and codes at the advice of our county planning staff and the general manager. We didn't want to do that because we're not going to regulate other programs, but we do want to make sure they're coordinated with us. So I think we captured all of that. I think this may be one of the best examples, if we get this passed, that we've ever had a state county coordination measure. Process.
Yeah, and those plus comments, as well as the ordinance itself, are out on the county website.
They're on your site. So if you go to your agenda and you click on,
That's
all of
public
them.
information.
what's that?
It's public information.
It's all public and it's all on your site.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, in addition to that, there's quite a lengthy report, from the gentleman from Loudoun County.
My turn.
That's kind of very eye-opening for anybody who has to edit. I would say it's definitely a good. So, and in, as far as that's concerned, we do talk a lot about energy. energy use. I didn't realize Virginia was actually in the PJM route. So what's been going on in Virginia is probably already affecting my electric rate, I'm guessing. Also understand that there's a possibility that some of the states in that could pull out of that.
So I'll be briefed on that on Thursday. Right now, the governors of New Jersey, Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania just had a meeting in Philadelphia to talk about it, and then Virginia as well. Are looking at, because interstate commerce, there's a lot of other issues they have to deal with. But they're concerned about the energy use, the impact on their ratepayers, just like we are, and they're going, our residents are getting hit, why should we be exporting energy to someplace like Delaware, who wants to put a data center up and only produces 20% of their energy? So there are some uncertainties from a policy perspective there. They come in addition to, I mean, look, we got to do energy generation. We got to figure this out. I think the future, as you'll see in Mike's report, is cogeneration at sites. It's going to take a while to get there. Delaware has challenges for that. For instance, their coastal zone, we don't allow energy generation, except for through a conversion permit or a grandfather in coastal zone site, which could happen in California and Israel. So it's challenging. And in Mike's paper, though, the reason I thought that was a good educational background piece. We're going to hear a lot from developers. We're going to hear a lot from technical experts. I give them policy arena. I'm working nationally with the guys in the policy arena, just like me, just figuring out how we manage it, how we regulate this, and how we work together on it. And that's why I thought it was a good educational piece for all of you.
It seems like the appetite for power is insatiable, yet. Is there any new generation or how's PJM? Yeah, that's handle the generation side of that. I mean, if you put a demand on, double your demand on the same supply, that's kind of have quite an effect. Or triple, or whatever it may end up to be, as fast as these cases end.
I think they will soften. I think the chip technology will reduce the energy stock. We're not there yet. I think it will come. When you have this kind of money and this kind of demand, I mean, look, in 1990, I was working on clean air stuff. When we had the clean air amendments in 1990, we were passing regulations and we didn't have the technology to reach. And somehow industry came up with the technology and figured it out. So there are technology forcing things that can be done. I think it's coming, but we have to make sure that we are careful and things are being put in place before we get too far down the road, get trouble in Virginia.
It speaks to the speed of everything that's happening and why we need kind of guardrails.
Yeah.
It's that he built a Maserati, 300 miles an hour. He wants to put strong brakes on that. And see that. Okay, thank
Any other questions?
Has anyone in Loudoun County expressed any kind of worry about the data transfer infrastructure? Because we're talking about energy infrastructure, but the data center obviously uses a lot of fiber optics. I don't know what kind of demand that is on.
So fiber optics, they're pretty good. The US government 30 years ago put screaming fiber optic networks down there. That's why they became data center. That's what drove it. In terms of transition, transmission has become an absolute nightmare. Technical power lines, insulators.
Can't hear you.
Your mic cut out again.
Yeah.
Your mic cuts out constantly.
But they are, they're putting new transmission lines in, going through communities. It is why the public, who had an incredibly low tax base for a long, long time, is pissed off, is screaming and fighting. And that's now they've got Federal Energy Regulatory Commission coming in with the current administration and trying to streamline the EIS stuff, allow them to go through. And it's a mess. And some of that is described in the white paper that was sent to you guys on Friday as part of the package. I highly recommend that you take the time and read that. And if you want, I would pick up the phone and call them.
It addresses fiber optic infrastructure or just the
It
power?
tells what it is. They have the fiber optic. Okay, fiber optic is not an issue for them. Energy transmission, figuring out how to get the energy to them and trying to look at, they're looking at direct current lines, high voltage direct current and other things that are some challenges, but try and meet as much of the need as they can, recognize that they can't. And I think right now, their thinking is that they really can't expand or handle anymore unless they go to cogeneration. But that's my interpretation. You have a copy of this white paper and I will get more updates on the other stuff on Thursday. And then I know the end of this month, Dave Culver is gonna come with me. We are actually going on a NACO tour of Data Center Alley and discuss with all of the national experts, East Coast, all county experts, about how we're gonna collectively try and deal with this issue as counties, because we really aren't seeing any state leadership or any federal leadership to deal with it, and we're getting the crap kicked out of us, and we gotta figure this out because we don't have as much help as we'd like to have.
I had just a clerical thing, if I looked at the,
Still can't hear you.
I have a clerical item, if I look at the substitute ordinance on the last page under section 8 severability, at the very end of the paragraph, it says, and shall be considered as continuations thereof as not as new in absence, regardless if severability is possible. I think that's a typo, and there should be an and there instead of an as, if the thereof.
Okay, yes,
Is that correct?
I think you're correct, we'll get that.
Okay, want to make sure.
I mean,
I'm sure we've got caught somewhere.
I literally, and just so you know, there are a few things that are more editorial in nature here. I did not get my final comments back from Denver until Thursday night. I scrambled on Friday to get this together quickly, because I really, even though we typically don't have substitutes in here until after the planning board, I thought this was an important enough issue. I wanted you to see what the intended changes were. The way,
I do want to thank everybody for all the, this was not an easy feat, short period of time. I see that we've got some state, bills now proposed, Senate bill and House.
Frank and Stephanie, I'm sorry, Frank Burns and Stephanie. Hanson, Senator Hanson, Burns have been very helpful, very responsive. Not all of my legislators have, but those two have been really tuned into the issue and working collaboratively.
So I think Mike Turner, Loudoun County said something to the effect of, data centers like we built an airplane, but we haven't built a landing strip yet. So put a landing strip together pretty quick.
Not only logistical centers, but state roads. That's just happening.
Very fast. Thank you, and I want to thank everybody.
Okay, no other questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak for or against this application or make any comments about it, please come forward. Begin by identifying yourself for the record. Speaker has 3 minutes, and as a reminder, to the speakers to not be repetitious, but also that all the scope of this hearing here tonight is for the planning board to take comments on the proposed changes to the county code. It said nothing to do with any plan that you may have heard about. It's only to do with the amendments to the county code to cover this new use. And reminder that it's the planning first function is yes, to comment, make information to city council, because final council, so the opportunities for support here in this area, land use to the have a flag for the speakers.
Okay, good evening. My name is Dale Swain, and I represent the Citizens Alliance for Responsible Land Use. Which is many people representing Radar, MOT Alliance, Civic League of Newcastle County, and folks that live in the Whitehall and Mayberry area that were dealing with the warehouses a couple of years ago. This provides guardrails. That is the key thing here. This ordinance is not against data centers in any way. But as Representative Carter discussed concerning. Okay. Concerning the. Is that better? concerning the situation in Loudoun County. Technical challenges. They were prepared. A lot of the states and counties in this country were not prepared for this major data centers. And we need to make sure that we are prepared because they present special challenges. And we want to make sure that we've got things covered. Remember how upset everybody got back in January with your electric bills? We all blamed Delmarva. Delmarva blamed PGM, the consortium around the states that provides the electric. Well, PGM blames data centers because most of the increases we've seen on electric are because of the needs of the data centers. Not that that's bad, but it's a fact. The water usage. We've heard instances of some areas in the country where people's wells have run dry or their water bills have gone up dramatically because of the use of water. Some of the data centers make promises of what they will do to take care of some of these issues. But promises are only promises. This ordinance will put the guardrails on the situation so that things will be done properly. And that's all that I think the public would like to see is we do not want to deal with the large increases. We don't want to deal with the environmental noise effects as a result of the data centers. Data centers, the companies behind them have billions of dollars. They're building these across the country because public wants the AI so they can query faster when they go on the internet. But they should foot the bill themselves for the cost and not the public. Bottom line. I can't see how any public official could oppose 25-101 if they truly represent their constituents. So that's the bottom line. Get these guardrails in place so that the data centers, if they are built, are paying their own share and not us. Thank you.
Decorum, please hold the floor.
Thank you.
My name is Deanna Balecki. I was just here listening to the presentation, had some general comments. As far as the noise is concerned, perhaps it could be considered to enclose the property with some kind of noise mitigating material, natural, man-made, a combination or otherwise. And then I was noticing on the slides that there was nothing in the goals that said it was to mitigate the costs to residents, to bear their costs or the burden. So I know that we're all familiar with the high rising costs of Delmarva. I hope that that's a big consideration. It's my understanding that some of these data centers are coming in place with the responsibility of bringing their own power with them. So I would also like to see if that would be considered as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, I think somebody forgot to start the meeting with the pledge.
Good evening, council members and all those present. My name is Matthew Amendola. I'm a 20-year journeyman electrician with the IBEW Local 313 and a longtime resident of Townsend. I know a lot of the conversation and concerns tonight will be focused towards residential impact, Project Washington could call. But I would like to touch on the construction standards this data center will be held to as it proceeds, which will affect everyone in this state for years to come. I'm here tonight to resubmit a formal written request for a project labor agreement on Project Washington, applications 2025-0346S and 2025-0347S, originally submitted during the ordinance introduction phase. I'd like to read into the record. I'm writing to formally request that the county council require a project labor agreement for all electrical work related to Project Washington before any final zoning or site approvals are granted. This data center is utility tie-in, demand high-skill electrical labor, substation construction, MW level service, fire protection, grounding system, and smart grid coordination. A PLA ensures IBW Local 313 electricians perform this critical work under safe, enforceable, and standards-driven conditions. It protects Delaware's apprenticeship pipeline, ensures veteran hiring, holds prevailing wage enforcement, and reduces costly rework, and risk on high voltage systems. I respectfully urge this council to withhold any zoning or permit approval on Project Washington until a binding, publicly reported PLA covering all electrical scope is submitted by the applicant. As part of this process, I filed 3 official FYI requests between Newcastle County and the state of Delaware to obtain all records related to standards of labor and electrical scope for this project, as well as any relevant PLA precedent. This action reflects commitment to public interest and local accountability. Thank you for the service and commitment to protect safety, standards, and long-term integrity in our county and our state. Severely, Matthew Amendola. And if I may, I'd just like to briefly close by reaffirming just how serious this project is for our local and for the public safety. IBEW Local 313 is the tip of the spear when it comes to electrical work in this state. We don't follow the standard, we set it. This will be one of the largest electrical undertakings in Delaware's history. And the consequences of cutting corners, they won't show up today. They'll show up 10, 20, 30 years from now. When systems fail, power drops, or lives are put at risk. That's why it has to be done right the first time, by union hands, under enforceable labor standards, and skilled tradesmen trained to protect the public, the infrastructure, and the future. That's what a project labor agreement guarantees, and that's what the people of Delaware deserve. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and for your commitment to protecting the safety, standards, and long-term future of our county and our state.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Just a reminder, county's ordinance, amendments has nothing to do with any project which you may have heard of. This is just the county's ordinance changes covered in that sense. Thank you.
My name is Joseph Walls. I'm the CEO of Veteran Services. We advocate for incarcerated veterans and disabled veterans in the state of Delaware. We raise a couple concerns. First, I want to thank Councilman Carter, Councilman Toole. I want to thank you guys for stepping up. You didn't have to put yourself in the firing line. I know you're probably getting a lot of feedback. We're here to support you 100%. I'm worried about the state. There's state legislation to take over local zoning. And I'm worried about that being a backdoor effort to stop things like this. So that's something that needs to be taken care of. I was at an earlier meeting where DP&L was there and they said that the substation was already built in anticipation of this project. Apparently, we already paid for it. The rate package. So that's something, when we talk about the cost of doing something like this, these people need to bear the full burden of that cost, not us.
That's right.
I want to talk about disabled veterans. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm 100% disabled, and I have traumatic brain injury. These low noises affect me greatly. They agitate me, and they get me to the point where I start thinking about doing something. You hear the fans in here? A lot of people, you don't hear the fans unless you notice it. I feel those fans. As Councilman Carter said, these decibel levels affect us physically. We have to think about all the veterans that live around this surrounding area. We have to think about what the noise level, the pollution, all that's going to have on these veterans. And finally, I would like to see, in addition to this ordinance, grant common citizens the standing to challenge these companies when they violate their agreements, their contracts, or zoning ordinances. Currently, we lack standing. If you don't have some type of provable injury, if I don't have cancer, I can't complain about a company polluting the areas that's going to cause me to have cancer 20 years from now.
Mr. Walls, 30 seconds.
We need to have standing so we can step up and hold these people accountable. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. We love you. Be safe.
Hi, my name is Bruce Wolfgard, and I'm going to speak in favor of this ordinance. I want to make it very clear that I'm not anti-data center. I just think that the realities that were largely described in Dave Carter's presentation are very real, very serious. They cannot be just managed by, we'll take care of it when it happens. Just looking at Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, which was referenced earlier today, that they have the State Department of Environmental Quality has issued 5,447 air permits for generators and data centers in their county. That's generating 3.3 gigabytes of energy, which is absolutely dwarfs on what we generate here in Delaware. Also, with respect to the grid, the North Virginia state regulators propose that Northern Virginia data centers use backup generators in a more continuous manner for a 5-month period in anticipation of transmission problems. It wasn't until a big outcry by the public that they back off on that plan. Point being here is that we have a lot of questions that don't have answers. We have Microsoft, who has purchased 3 Mile Island, even though the engineers that closed it down said it should not be reopened, but they're going to be doing it anyway. There's a lot of influence, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of big players that are behind these data centers. But let's make it very clear that the ordinances in Newcastle County were never designed to deal with the magnitude of this kind of problem. We need guardrails in place, otherwise we'll be left unprotected. By not updating the code, knowing what is coming, or worse, not having a full understanding of the impact of what's being proposed without guardrails is absolutely irresponsible. So let's act now, not later. Let me read a Facebook posting that touches on this point. My wife received the following Facebook post paid for by Project Washington, and it says, quote, "Opportunity is knocking in Newcastle County's door in the form of a state-of-the-art revenue-generating and environmentally responsible data center project. If we don't seize the moment, other states will follow. This will send a message to elected officials today to show your support." Reality is that this is an aim, shoot, and do something right type of proposal. I'm suggesting that what we do is we put guardrails in place and then build the data centers. In this way, we can have environmentally acceptable facility. We can be protecting our communities. We can be generating the revenue from the centers that are built. And we won't be shifting costs to the taxpayer from all the after effects. Thank you for your consideration. My name is Mark Willis, I live in Newcastle, Delaware. Mr. Carter, I have a couple of questions for you. The OSHA standard for ocean noise standard for workplace exposure is 5 decibels exchange rate, meaning that for every 5 decibels increase in noise, the allowable exposure time is half. The permissible exposure limit is 90 decibels over 8-hour time average period. I'd like to know, where did you get the 55 decibel range? My second question is, why do you have the specific date of July 29th, 2025? And my third question is, there is a existing data center on Bear Corbett Road. Have you made any effort to go there and see what the noise rate is at that facility? Thank you.
Yeah, the way this works is that the speakers can pose questions. They will be answered at the conclusion of all the speakers by the applicant who will respond.
Hello, I'm Dr. William Robbins, retired doctor in internal medicine and geriatrics. So the amendments before the board are critical report is ensuring the operation of this data center that is proposed for to be safe for air quality, water resources of the local and regional communities. As everyone has said,
Data centers are needed for future growth and prosperity of Delaware and for the nation. However, these data centers come with enormous consumption of energy and water resources that are not done correctly can harm air quality and cause the lowering of regional water tables and rivers. This proposed Delaware Center will consume as much electricity as it does in the entire state at this time. Obviously, our electric bills are going to be going up. The source of data centers, their power as often as Dave mentioned, is diesel generators. My research into the environmental statements of previous built data centers are using 200 to 500 diesel generators to cool and run these computers. They generally, as Dave stated, are using 1,000 to 4,000 gallons of fuel, diesel fuel per hour. That is heavy duty industrial operation with major pollutants of ozone, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and particulate matter. All of these agents and others from the combustion of diesel fuel are highly inflammatory to the brain, the heart, and the brains. In addition, young children are highly susceptible to asthma attacks from these agents. So control of your emissions from these generators is highly important. And now I want you to consider what just happened this past year, 18 days in May and June. I'm referring to a Delaware paper review of Delaware City Refinery. In those 8 days in June, released 400 tons of sulfur dioxide into the local and regional airspace. State review of that event showed that no air-ground quality measures were over accepted safe levels. It's hard to believe you can release 4 times the normal limits of sulfur dioxide and you wouldn't really detect it. I wonder where they were placed in or the appropriate places and where they were working.
Sure, you have 20 seconds.
Dave's summary continues to say the sulfur dioxide particulate matter released in a vat does hang around for long periods of time. They cause some increased asthma attacks and ischemic events. I will remind everybody in this room that ischemic event is a heart attack or a stroke. That is not temporary to the patients that have that. Young children are susceptible to asthma attacks, and from that recovery of the asthma, they miss much school.
Sir,
I must
but the record will be actually open until Friday, close of business, written testimony be added to that.
Well, I do. I just want to commend Dave Carter for all the work he did talking to Loudoun County. I am from Northern Virginia. I just talked to family today. They're living in Stafford, Virginia. The concerns of the data centers is very much forefront. Environmental groups are talking about the Potomac Basin water. Data centers are now being considered the stressor for the drought or the water table in Potomac.
Hi, I'm James Hillman from Middletown, Delaware area. I'm here to express my strong support for the proposed data center ordinance. Our current zoning classifications were developed long before the advent of large-scale data centers, and we've already seen the adverse impacts of inadequate zoning which allow truck distribution centers to be built in the heart of residential communities. Data centers may currently fall into BP-type zoning, but they're not like a typical business park. They have limited job creation compared to other industries. Data centers, especially the proposed hyperscale data center, requires enormous amounts of electricity and water to cool the building and equipment. Because they also demand uninterrupted power, they require backup systems. This is often hundreds of on-site fossil fuel generators that create air pollution. The amount of water and electricity needed will certainly strain local resources and increase costs for everyone. This is especially concerning as we've already experienced large electricity rate increases. Other environmental impacts, such as noise from the cooling systems and power generation, will certainly harm nearby residents. Other locations in the U.S., notably Northern Virginia, as Dave has mentioned, have had years of experience of large-scale data centers. They have lived through what worked well and what did not. I believe this ordinance seeks to leverage their experience. It creates a framework that both protects residents and provides reasonable standards and qualifications for data centers. I believe we have an historic opportunity to get this right, rather than to lament our inaction. I hope the board, along with other county and state agencies, will come together to support adoption of this vitally needed ordinance. Thank you.
Hello. I live in Newcastle County, and as a concerned resident, I cannot support building a massive data center in our suburban neighborhood because the risks far outweigh the benefits. Ordinance 25-1 is needed to address the unique dangers of large projects like this one. A facility of this scale will use more electricity than all Delaware homes combined, straining the grid and raising utility bills, and drain enormous amounts of clean water resources meant for households and future generations. Should not be sacrificed for corporate profit. The non-stop noise from cooling systems and generators would harm nearby residents, while property values and air quality decline. This project doesn't belong in a suburban zone. I urge the council to pass this ordinance now to protect our community from environmental, financial, and health burdens.
Record.
Yes, it is.
Good evening. My name is Steve Gase. I wasn't planning on speaking here. I'm a nuclear engineer and physicist. I'd like to just get your minds around a few things. A facility like this does not come alone. It comes along with many things, many challenges that are very real and very complex. Number one, with the power to feed a facility like this, the power lines coming in are not the kinds that you're going to see coming down your street. These are the 500 kV towers. I invite you to Google what a 500 kV tower looks like. Those are the gigantic metal things. You can't get within 11 feet of those or they will arc. So that means the whole area, has to be cleared out. There are no residents, nothing in that area. It's very difficult to even have a road going underneath this. The other thing I realize is the cooling system. If you're going to have a closed loop cooling system, the heat exchangers will probably be 2 to 3 times the size of the facility itself. Just to give you an idea, that's a lot of heat to be putting into the environment. Just wanted you guys to be aware of what comes with this thing. Thank you.
We need everybody's name for the record.
My name is Steve Agace, A-G-A-C-E.
Again, please hold the applause.
Hello, my name is Mark Nardone. I represent Delaware Nature. Thanks for the opportunity to comment on the ordinance. Delaware Nature Society, the limited aspect of protection and responsible use for our environment. I think it's fair to say it's also by surprise, which is reason enough to move cautious. This ordinance creates the conditions to ensure proposals are evaluated in a manner consistent with our land use policies and our goals to protect the natural resources. In Delaware, neither the county nor the state yet has the specific experience needed to anticipate the effects of these large-scale data centers. We have no idea how in practice the center would impact our energy supply and prices, our water resources, and our public health. We know from the experience of Northern Virginia and other places that converting areas of forests or other open space to building risk dramatically altering wildlife habitats, stormwater runoff, and ecosystems. We know these facilities also use enormous amounts of electricity, which stresses the grid, drives demand for more power, often generated from harmful fossil fuels. We know that the cooling systems can consume hundreds of thousands of gallons of water a day, potentially depleting out the person's service price. Where did that water come from? We don't know. We know data centers and supporting industries regularly produce PFAS gases, F gases, and refrigerants that cool the electronics. And though F gases are generally less toxic than some other PFAS, there's little health and safety information on most. The little we do know points to a concerning toxicity. We know that F gases are also potent greenhouse gases. Can't afford to raise the temperature anymore. curbing such emissions is the goal of the state's climate action plan. And I know too that we now have a bill, goes into effect in about 14 months that requires the state and the county to work together, requires the counties to consider climate effects in all its all its planning decisions. This is not consistent with the goals of our climate action plan. That's really all I wanted to say. We think the ordinance addresses these concerns, but hope you'll approve. Thanks very much.
I'm Leroy McNair, and I live in the traditions of Whitehall. I'm also a minister of the gospel and a disabled veteran. But we don't need anything to hurt us more. Somebody's getting paid upstream. The rich gets richer and the poor gets deeper in poor. It's time to block these kinds of things that people come up with and someone else get paid and we get stuck with it. Please block this effort and don't let it come in there. We live right behind the area that you're gonna put this data center in. We got a bunch of guys who are veterans like myself. Can't handle that, the noise, double the water. We pay for our electricity to come from other states. If they're gonna use more than the rest of us, the bill is gonna get higher. Amen? Amen. Amen.
Hello, my name is Douglas Bell. I'm a senior principal consultant and president of Kavanaugh Saatchi Associates, an acoustic consulting firm, 50-year history located in Massachusetts. In the past 35 years, I've been the principal in charge of over 1,000 projects associated with environmental sound. I'm thoroughly familiar with noise produced by all industrial facilities. In fact, I co-authored a textbook on the topic, Industrial Noise Control, Fundamentals and Applications. It is my professional opinion that there is no need for Newcastle County to amend Chapter 40 of the County Code to place specific restrictions on sound produced by data centers. The amendment recommends applying a fixed sound level limit of 55 dBA or 55 dBc at the sending property line. The language currently is not even clear as to where this applies. Common property lines abutting residential properties or all other property lines, public roads. At the very least, the language should be amended to apply at or within residential receiving properties. The Newcastle Noise Ordinance, Chapter 22, currently provides equitable and practical restrictions on environmental sound produced by all individual users, including data centers. This is a robust and unambiguous ordinance which has served the county for decades. The standard addresses both level and character of emitted sounds. Limits are established based on incremental increases above existing ambient sound level. This is by far a more effective approach to minimizing sound inputs as opposed to applying fixed limits. For example, in areas where ambient sound levels are low, the limits will be correspondingly low. Limits are even more restricted for emitted sounds that are inconsistent with the existing environment. Specifically, penalizing sources which produce pure tones or cyclically varying and repetitive impulse. Proposed addition of 55 dBc limit to data center sound emissions is baseless and over-restricted. A weighting correlates best with human hearing and is basis for almost all effective environmental sound regulation. It's common for background sound in the environment to be well in excess of 55 dBc with no adverse impacts on the community. Even the quietest rural areas will often have background sound levels above 55 dBc. A limit of 55 dBc might be used as an acoustic design goal for a concert hall or a recording studio where design goals are at or near the threshold of human hearing.
30 seconds.
Oh, gosh. I came from Boston. Where do you live? The proposed amendment also recommends a 1,000-foot setback from any residential zone. This does not provide any additional protection against noise impacts that are already addressed by the noise ordinance. The limits are the limits. You don't need to tell us how to make the limits. We have to design to them. In conclusion, the proposed amendments consider regulated data centers using C-weighted sound metrics. C-weighted emphasizes low-frequency sounds, which are often below the threshold of human hearing, and does not necessarily correlate to human response. To the best of my knowledge, the use of C-weighting is only used to regulate noise emission from nightclubs and outdoor music venues. where the limits are 100 dBc. Sorry, I apologize for running over that.
My name is Joel Harrison, a resident of Rutledge, and a member of the directors, made there. I have a concern around DBC because I have to sleep at night, so the deep frequencies, especially that you said nightclubs like bass, is a concern to me. I can hear the deep frequencies from far away. In general, I have seen the ordinances as a positive step. I do think we need to have, more regulation around this. I haven't, I don't know if there's any representatives starting here tonight, but as a resident, I am not convinced that this is in our best interest overall, but certainly if we're going to move ahead, we need more regulation around it. As much as I hate regulation in general, we need to hear it. It hasn't been clear to me what the overlap is between state and local jurisdiction. I've heard there's some potential conflict or superseding jurisdiction, so I would love for that to be made a little more clear to us. I'd also love to know what kind of timelines we could realistically achieve to pass these amendments. There was a bond or a reserve amount mentioned, and that sounds like a great thing. I've also, watched videos where a similar concept is used for the decommissioning of oil rigs, and yet they sit out there derelict because the amount that was collected for them didn't grow over time and wasn't enough to achieve what they wanted to do at the end of that. So possibly growing over time could be important. As a resident, one of the things I had related to sound was, do we take wind into account and the sound that travels over top as opposed to at ground level? As a resident, measuring from far off where my house is might be more effective than measuring at the edge of the property. That was just a thought, and maybe it's already taken into account for any other rules. Then my last concern was Hamburg Road, which is one of the roads that is abutting the property. Very narrow. There's no bike lane. Part of it has no shoulder. So if you're riding a bike or walking, you literally have to walk in the road. It's not fun as a biker, and it's not safe. Given the lack of clarity for data centers in general, this one in particular, I would love to ensure that any, the required investment in general,
30 seconds.
like walking or biking, is in scope when planning for Hamburg Road, as well as for data centers in general. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Stephanie Royal. My family has roots here in Delaware, in the Middletown, Delaware area since 1847. The Port of Callaway Library and the Biggs House have been part of my family since they were erected. For those of you who weren't familiar with the Biggs House, he was the 46th governor of this state. I would simply ask that anybody who's considering any information here, not just consider Loudoun County, but go and dive deep into Tennessee. I actually had the privilege, or not so much, of taking a class with Mr. Elon Musk. Yes, okay, and he was cited in Tennessee for all of the generators that he was using in the particular matter that was put out into the atmosphere, which is poisoning our children. The environmental hazards are cleanup afterwards that we do not want to face. We sit here and we talk about Delmarva power bills. What's this going to cost us to provide healthcare needs for our children and for generations to come? I have 5 grandchildren. We've been around since 1847. My family is not going anywhere. I'm completely against this project. The reason that they are coming to Delaware, we talk about how it's going to put our power sources. Does anybody know that downstate off the beach of Delaware, the University of Delaware is proposing putting in wind power? They're also proposing putting in a lot of electronic variables to track the environment off the coast of Delaware, because we are already in such a precarious state. Adding a facility like this will have repercussions for generations to come. It will affect your children, and no amount of money that is brought in through labor contracts is going to negate the guilt that you feel in allowing this proposed building to go through. Good evening.
Again, a reminder, this has to do with any specific project, this is the county's changes to the ordinances to, as we said before, put guardrails.
Good evening. My name is Al Bias. I'm from Newcastle. And thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Not being here. Now, a couple of things I'd like to talk about this evening is power, the water, and also one other thing that wasn't on the list. First off, the power, it's huge. Everybody here pretty well knows that. Even if they're not able to acquire the north parcel, the south parcels, it's going to take half of that 1.2 billion, which is still a big, huge chunk. The infrastructure is not able to take that. I get alerts from PJM, the interconnecting utility provider service. This year, 2025, there have been 11 major emergency generating events where they put their large users on notice that power was going to be curtailed. And they have agreements where these large users cut back their power use for a favorable rate to prevent brownouts and stuff like that. But these things have a way of happening and coming along, no matter how many people stand up to it. Unfortunately, I am totally opposed to something of this scale. But if it's going to come, it's going to come. And I hope it doesn't. It may be in a reduced size or something a little more manageable, and that may fit. But if they're looking at the power that they're intending to, and they're going to invest in it, let them invest in Delaware, let them invest in Newcastle County. Right? Everybody's got a roof, put a solar array up on every roof that's capable of it, of supporting it, let them pay for it, and anybody that wants it, commercial property, vacant land, brownfield, let them dive into that, all right, take a point of that, all right? And something else, if they want to suck on the water, there's water. We've got a dozen Superfund sites in the Newcastle, Delaware City area. A lot of them still have interceptor wells that are pulling waste plume that's traveling underground. The drinking water wells, they put the interceptor wells in to pull back the lag. That water,
30 seconds.
Delaware Sand and Gravel, that's discharged into Army Creek. All right. Let them pay to harvest out of it. Let them clean it up to clean water standards and use that if they want to. Nothing new for them. Also, this thing's going to be a hot mess with cooling towers, paper mills, large places like that are notorious fog generators. You have the highway of the state of Delaware passing right by there. You'll have towers on end, fog banks, that with all the resulting potential for disaster there too. I think that needs to be addressed. So thank you all for your time and listening. Let's keep this thing down with all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dylan Harding. I live right up the street in Newcastle, and I am for these proposed guidelines. I want to ask everybody the question of why Microsoft and Meta and Google are willing to invest $1 trillion into these data centers. It's not just because everybody really likes using AI. It's because they're hedging their bets to be able to replace your labor. That's their investment. So without these guidelines, just letting them come into Delaware, do whatever they want, spend that money just for you to replace the labor of your children is ridiculous. This is the least we can do, is put some sort of small guidelines in for them to push back. We shouldn't be letting these data centers be a Trojan horse to let you subsidize your own the replacement of your own labor. Delaware has a long history of poisoning its citizens and letting all of these companies do whatever they want. It's time we stop that. So I'm for these guidelines. Thank you.
My name is Alyssa Hall. I'm a resident of Wilmington. I'm here to express my support for the ordinance and also for even stronger permitting. the ordinance helps to address at least some of the concerns that I have about the impacts of future data center projects. So many people have already mentioned the energy costs. Data centers are being considered in the state, even as the state of Pennsylvania, which is one of the biggest energy producers in the PJM grid, is threatening to pull out the PJM. This would further reduce the energy available for this data center projects. Another example in Virginia, also part of the PJM, which we've heard about several times tonight, state residents had to foot a $1.25 billion bill for transmission that was designed largely for a handful of data center customers in only a small part of the state, probably Fairfax. I hope the state and county can ensure that if these data center projects go through, the surge in energy demand is not passed on as a cost to consumers, and that any economic benefits are passed on to the communities that will be right on the borderline, the fence line, and that will have to endure the light pollution, the noise pollution, and potentially the air pollution from any data center operation. A report by the National Resources Defense Council, which I hope that the committee members will read, it just came out in September, recommends that data centers be required to bring their own energy generation. I think a couple people have already alluded to this tonight. Data centers should have to fund their own clean energy projects or match every hour of energy used with an hour of clean energy produced nearby. And I know this is sort of one of those state and county level issues as well. I hope the county council will also consider what proactive and robust enforcement of this ordinance will look like. I think it was mentioned in the ordinance text that they would have to submit a report every year on a yearly basis about how they were complying with the ordinance. But I think we can look to the example of a mega data center in Memphis that's recently been in the news. They were currently running 20 more gas turbines than they were legally permitted for. This is something we need to think about in terms of the backup generation that would be required for these mega projects. Other people have already mentioned that these generators, diesel generators, generate particulate matter. They also emit NOx, which forms ozone smog, and these worsen asthma and other cardiovascular diseases. Last month, I canvassed neighbors. Thank you. Neighbors of the future data center with the Sierra Club of Delaware, and the people I spoke to who were aware of the data center project had serious concerns about the impact on pollution, well-being, and traffic in their community. Thank you to the committee and Councilman Carter for your work.
My name is Allison West, and I live in Middletown, Delaware. I'm only going to speak to two things. First, the gentleman, the scholar, the book writer about the auditory impacts from the sound and all. I was in Virginia a little over a week ago and met a gentleman who lived in Loudoun County near this track where these data centers are. And he has a pacemaker and he lived 4 miles away, but the sound waves were disrupting his pacemaker and he had to move. So he moved to Chincoteague, Virginia to be able to be far enough away to make sure he was not disrupted. So it's not just about what we hear, it's how those sound waves, and you can feel it. I am autistic, I feel those sound waves and they're very disruptive to me. So it isn't just about what we hear, it's the feelings it causes. That's that. The rest I'm going to speak to is to thank David Carter for all of his work and sincerely appreciate this and what he brought forth. Please consider voting up this ordinance. It is so important we have these guardrails. I'm going to recap one thing he mentioned because the mic wasn't working and I don't know that everyone heard this. We get 80% of our energy from outside the state, from our surrounding adjoining states. We bring that in as part of that PJM consortium. Many of the states closest to us are considering stopping provisioning of electric to Delaware because they need to keep it now because they're having data centers built. They don't want to send it out of state. And if we have to go further afield to get our electricity, that will increase costs on top of the cost of the data center. So please be mindful that our access to electricity could drastically change in the near future because of data centers in other states. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Appreciate your consideration of this.
My name is Keith Sack with an organization called Delaware Coalition for Open Government.
I want to thank Councilman Carter for his considerable effort to develop this draft ordinance. Although I've not been a Newcastle County resident for several years now, many of Delcox members are. And for those of us who live elsewhere in the state, it still has relevance as large data centers will impact us all through utility rates, et cetera. As good as this draft is, I still think there's room for improvement. First, the ordinance should require the county to consult with Delaware's Department of Health and Social Services about possible health impacts that these will have on physical and mental health of individuals, especially the young. Although the draft mentions noise issues multiple times, it does not overtly seek DHSS's input on health implications, but rather relies on DENREG to address noise issues. If you have a hearing problem, you usually go to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. You don't go to an environmental engineer.
That's right.
Given DHS has direct responsibility for health issues, Newcastle County should consult with them. In fact, the state planning office should also seek their input on these kinds of projects. I also say that the county should not make any decisions about data centers until the public has been consulted. The public needs to have a say. The Public Service Commission should conduct a comprehensive study, but involve and have public meetings or input from the population that lives in this state. It's crucial to know whether the projects such as Starwood are ultimately beneficial to Delaware or if it's not. Equally important, it's important for the public to know whether data centers are going to seek electricity rates and shift more of the burden onto us and away from the utilities. It's only fair to know what's really going on with benefits, who benefits from these input from. Although the study that should be done is necessarily something Newcastle County can dictate, it is something that it can ask the legislature to mandate. So in Delaware, once and for all, whether large data centers are net negatives or net positives. Right now, there is no public discussion about whether large data centers will ultimately be a net positive or a net negative over time. Thanks very much. I'll submit it.
Thank you, Mr. Stack.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy Phillips. That's a Y and 2 L's. I'm in Hoggaston, Delaware. And as a 30-year IT professional, I can tell you that the current mentality in the tech world is get something out fast, let it break, and let the pissed off users tell you how to fix it and what needs fixing. If you've ever had an update on your iPhone or your laptop and you spent 2 days testing out Microsoft or Apple, you know what I'm talking about. That's great in the software world. It doesn't work so much for physical buildings, our natural environment, water, and electrical resources. I appreciate this ordinance. I think it's a good start. It could go further. And if you want a model to use, Ohio has currently a new law that went into effect in July. They require 85% of the projected usage to be paid for by the data center for grid improvements. Now, if you have that as grid improvements or put solar and batteries on every house and business in Delaware, it might be the same cost, I don't know, but it's a good start. They also require contracts from the data center with the utility for 12 years with early exit penalties. This would shift the burden of the cost directly to the data center, not to the users in the environment. So you can certainly Google this Ohio law yourselves, and whether you like it or not, AI will give you the results.
Good evening, my name is Dustin Thompson. I'm the director for the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. Delaware, like many other states, and Newcastle County, like many other counties, has been flat-footed and on its back heel when it comes to regulating large load growth like data centers. Yes, we have data centers in Delaware. They're about 20 megawatts on average. You might have a couple that are a little bit over. Nothing close to what we're talking about here. We are today in much the same place that we were several years ago with speculative warehousing developments that followed with the explosive growth of online shopping after COVID. Now, nationally and here in Delaware, seeing vacant buildings, slow construction, and withdrawing applications on that front. But here's the difference. Where the risk of speculative warehouse development is mainly on the developer and the immediate community, the risk of speculative data center development will be borne by ratepayers, by the entire state, and by county residents. And now we're even seeing warehouse developers who got too far ahead of themselves lobbying to stop common sense ordinances like this one because they want to flip warehouses to the next boom, data centers. But then they want to do it without any input from council or the nearby communities. And that's wholly unacceptable, and that's why this pending ordinance doctrine needs to be invoked. When we look at data center development across the country, we are seeing disturbing trends that came from a lack of foresight in local and state codes. I'm not going to touch on all of them, but I want to mention one point. There's a real difference between when speculative developers, like what we're dealing with now, build these projects versus when end users build them. Recently, I was at a multi-state PJM conference with state agencies, members of the administration, energy experts. And during a panel on managing grid impacts, a Google spokesperson was asked if Google would be willing to put more skin in the game, to produce their own energy, invest in efficiency, meet their own capacity needs. And he said without hesitation, yeah, happy to. And we've seen that. Meta and Google and others are investing in advanced immersion cooling, noise reduction, and clean energy and solar to power their facilities. That's a big difference between when end users and speculative developers do these projects. When projects are built for speculation, they do the bare minimum. If you want more, if you want better, put it in code or it ain't gonna happen. That's what this ordinance is about. It's not about stopping data centers. It's about common sense. It's about demanding better. It's about protecting ratepayers, protecting the county, and protecting our communities.
That's fine, 30 seconds.
By requiring better, like these advanced immersion cooling systems, we can actually create more high-paying jobs, lower grid impacts, protect the communities from harmful low-frequency noises, which are not generated by immersion cooling systems. We can have economic development, we can have jobs, and we can protect our communities, our state and our county. That's what this is about. Thank you, and I hope you give a positive vote.
Good evening. My name is Jillian Jackson. I also want to voice my support for this ordinance. I'm so grateful for the chance to be here tonight to express my opinion on this matter as part of a democratic process here in my community. I'm grateful for everyone here sharing their opinions one way or the other. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a regular citizen. So I have to rely on the research that's being done by experts to explain the dangers and explain the risks and explain how we can best get ahead of those. But with that being said, I'm in support of this ordinance. If there are ways to make it more restrictive so that we are all safer, I'm in support of that too. As a person, again, not a scientist, but just as a person, I understand that if companies who are looking for money aren't held to a standard, they're going to seek ways to get that money any way they can without consideration for the impacts of the community, of the environment. And so we need to get ahead of them with our regulations, unfortunately. We need to be thinking about the environment, we need to be thinking about health, we need to think about the community and the quality of life for all of us in our community. We need to think about sustainability. We need to think about decommissioning. All of these things have been said and have been already said better than I can. I just want to underscore them and say I'm another person in the community who's really concerned about these things. When we care for our environment, we care for each other. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And I really want to live in a county where we are being leaders, or we're being national leaders at safeguarding our environments, our communities. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Larry Lambert, lifelong resident of Claymont in Newcastle County, proud to be here. I want to thank Councilman Carter for his efforts as well as the other council persons that worked on it. I want to thank the planning council. I want to thank everyone that's here, whether you're in support or whether you're against it. To support this ordinance is not to be opposed to data centers. Almost everyone in here has a smartphone. This is projected by a laptop that's using data now. We already have data centers. This is a common sense ordinance to make sure that when we're bringing forward a 6 million square foot data center, that we're taking a look at special use, heavy industry use, industrial use. These are common sense guardrails being put in place to make sure that we're doing it the right way. That's all. I actually don't really understand what the real opposition is to it. These are data centers. We're going into the year 26. Technology is always changing. There will always be new things. We can't just force things through using the entitled special use standard. What is that? Come on. This is common sense. Let's do it right. Let's make sure we're measured. And when we talk to the impacted communities, if it isn't done right, they don't want it. If it's gonna be done right, then they'll listen, they're open to it. And a gentleman earlier talked about the labor aspect of it. If this is gonna happen in individuals' backyards, let's make sure that there's a local hire component. Let's make sure there's a PLA in it. We need to make sure that this work is done right. And when it's done right, it's by workers that have access to be able to collectively bargain. My dad was a proud member of the IBEW for the last 27 years of his life. I grew up in a proud union household. We need this work to not only be union, but to be local work, local hire. There are individuals in our county that are underemployed. These dead-end jobs going nowhere are not working out. We can't talk about economic development if we're not talking about local hire. Again, this is common sense. Let's take a look at the standards. Let's do it right. Let's revisit the noise pollution aspects, the environmental aspects. And if it's going to happen, let's do it right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Frank Burns. I'm a resident of Pike Creek. And I'm here to speak in favor of this ordinance. We have a mismatch occurring between electricity demand and supply that is going to get worse, much worse, over the next 5 to 10 years. Bringing new energy sources online takes a decade to 15 years. I don't care if you're talking about gas turbines, it's 5 to 7 year order time on the new combined cycle gas turbines. If you're hearing things different than that, you're being misled. There's a 2-year minimum, and it's been 4 to 5 years, but they're trying to get it down to 2 to get it through the PJM pipeline to get approved at the beginning. Then you've got to order, you've got your permitting, siting and everything. We can't bring new energy online in the type of time frame that these data centers all want to go up, okay? So we are looking at a very real possibility, not only of having our electric rates skyrocket, but if this continues without control, we're going to end up with rolling blackouts or worse in the future. And that's just the reality of what's going to happen if this goes unchecked. PJM is trying to step up and do some things to cause forced curtailment. And I will say this, if you want to know how much we all paid to upgrade that Red Lion substation, which is where one proposed center wants to plug in, that was $10 million that we all paid. I think if someone's going to be a good citizen, they need to come up front, be upfront, cover their costs. There's a huge amount of money to be made by these data centers. Amazon Cloud Services made 4 times as much money last year as all of Amazon retail. There is a huge amount of money. The other thing I'd say is I'd recommend that if you want a project, you want to bring it into a state that's depending on exports of energy to survive. There's an acronym I learned from Keith Steck, I spoke earlier, Beyonce. Bring your own new clean energy. Okay? It's an easy acronym.
There's enough money in these projects to make that happen. It might not happen on the timetable that some people want because they want to push these up really fast and get them done. It's doable. These organizations have the money to do it, and we should demand that they stand up for labor. Not only PLAs, what is it that we need to make sure is happening so that we as Delawareans are made whole? And if this happens, we don't get it tanked with costs that we don't need to bear. Anyway, thank you.
Well, I voted for you.
Good evening. My name is Robbie Anstead, resident 19810, otherwise known as Greater Claymont. I really appreciate you, State Representative Larry Lambert, for coming up and testifying on behalf of impacted communities. I'm here tonight, like Larry is, because people in the most impacted areas are not able to, for one reason or another, come out down to Newcastle to hear about how ordinances may or may not impact what ends up in their backyard. So thank you, Councilman Carter, for also putting an ordinance on a moratorium for warehouses some time ago. In addition to this, the foresight that you've demonstrated is important to listen to. In Claymont, right along Naaman's Road, right by the 495 junction, we have 1 million square feet of warehouses within a half mile of each other. 2 of them are occupied, and they're in the backyards of Knollwood residents. I want to say thank you to Representative Larry Lambert again, because through his work pioneering the Justice 40 Oversight Committee in Delaware, the nation's first oversight committee, making sure that federal funds reach impacted communities, DNREC created the DNREC equity focused area map. So I would encourage the planning board, please take a look at that and look to see where the warehouses are currently located that might try to take advantage of this data center boom, because we have a 500,000 square foot warehouse where the Tri-State Mall used to be, hundreds of feet from a historic landmark, also one of Delaware's first red line neighborhoods, Hickman Road. Hundreds of feet away from Knollwood, workforce housing for the steel mill, which they operated in the backyards of Knollwood. Hundreds of feet away from Maddox Estates, which had 495 cut through their neighborhood. So I come here tonight just to share my gratitude to the county for taking a step in foresight. We rely on you, not just in Claymont, but most of Newcastle County is unincorporated. We rely on you to make sure that when the development practices have created sacrifice zones, neighborhoods that is more attractive for industry to come to for one reason or another, that we're able to look at the landscape and make adjustments, not to prevent innovation, but to guide it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marissa McClinton. I'm the Environmental Justice Associate Organizer for the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. First, I want to thank the developer for being here to hear all our concerns, and I want to really put on the record that we will not be bullied by developers or their attorneys in any efforts to help us to fight our standing for this ordinance. I'm here to testify in support of Substitute 1 for Ordinance 25101. However, I'm specifically here to request that you support a key provision outlined in the ordinance dealing with the effective date of the law. Back in July, a developer looking to do a data center here in Delaware held a town hall with several state and local officials in attendance. Not only were they unable to answer many questions, he gave several pieces of misleading or outright false information, but they also stated they were early in the process and there would be more communication with nearby communities before any part of the project moved forward. In the following days, following that town hall, the applicant caught wind of the ordinance Councilman Carter was working on, likely from reporting that came about as a result of that town hall. Councilman Carter filed his ordinance, and then just a few short days later, the applicant broke those promises of additional community engagement to file their application with the county. This was clearly an effort by the developer to preempt what was in the ordinance, assuming that the council would not do their job and ensure the pending ordinance doctrine was utilized and followed. In Delaware, the pending ordinance doctrine is a well-established principle of land use law that holds that when a zoning or land use ordinance has been formally introduced and is pending before adoption, it can be applied to pending or newly submitted applications. This kind of developer action to skirt the law is exactly why courts in Delaware have consistently upheld this principle, including in Ocean Bay Mart Inc. versus City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware 2022. It was well known that Councilman Carter was working to ensure legislative protections for the worst impacts of speculative data center development. This public knew it, and certainly the applicants knew it as well. The communities around this proposed facility deserve nothing less than the planning board and the council upholding this doctrine and ensuring that they are protected in the same way all county residents deserve to be protected by this comprehensive ordinance. I've been really glad to hear so many people out here talking about this ordinance today. It is very crucial we have these protections in place. I was really happy to see everybody. Thank you. And we hope to have a positive recommendation of this ordinance in your report. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shay Frisbee, and I am a resident in the 19703 area, Claymont, Delaware. Another impacted area with a lot of development that has been going on over the years. I've lived in my community for over 30 years, so I have seen a lot, and I've been impacted as well. And I just want to say that I am here to express my support for the proposed ordinance allowing data centers, while also encouraging careful consideration of its implementation to protect our community. Data centers are critical infrastructure for modern business, technology, and economic growth. They bring significant investment to our area, and when developed responsibly, they can generate local jobs and strengthen the economy without imposing undue burdens on our residents. At the same time, it is important that these projects are developed with transparency and accountability. I encourage the council to ensure that any approved data center includes clear plans for energy efficient water usage, traffic management, and noise mitigation, as this will help to balance economic growth with the quality of life of our residents. I also want to mention that the whispers from the warehouse developers is an even bigger reason for these huge data centers to be special use as the ordinance would mandate. We cannot allow our warehouses to bypass review as they switch to data centers without the proper review of impact. I support the passage of the ordinance because it provides a framework for responsible development with proper safeguards in place. Data centers can be a positive asset to Newcastle County, boosting the economy while protecting the neighborhoods and natural resources. Thank you for your time and attention.
Good evening, my name is Pam Scott. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Saul Ewing, and I've been working in land use realm in Newcastle County for more than 30 years. Regulation is one thing, but over-regulation is something entirely different. When the county adopted the UDC in 1997, it was the most comprehensive zoning and subdivision code in the state of Delaware, and it remains that to this day as it has been updated over the years. There are a number of things in this ordinance that data center users, operators, owners can easily comply with, but there are a number of other provisions in the ordinance that specifically in the substitute that frankly we would like to have a discussion with the sponsors of the ordinance about what the intent and the meaning is behind some of the requirements, because frankly we don't understand them. Data centers have been in place for at least 30 years across the country. And in Newcastle County, we have several data centers. Probably many of you aren't even familiar with that. In addition to that, the UDC already regulates data centers. There are specific provisions in there permitting them as a specific use in certain zoning classifications in Newcastle County. This ordinance would essentially restrict what zones data centers could go in, making many of the existing data centers non-conforming uses, which creates a billing set of problems for those particular uses. I'm not sure what was meant by speculative data center development. I don't think anyone spends the amount of money that would be required to be spent to obtain the approvals and construct a facility such as this, if it was purely a speculative development. The UDC, there was concern about generators used at data centers. I want to be clear that generators are used for backup power purposes only in the event of a power outage. So they're not run 365, 24/7. They only come into play in the event that there is actually a power outage in which there is a need for backup power. In terms of electricity, data centers pay for their own power. They have to go out on the market and acquire electricity, like any other major user would have to do.
Scott,
so-
you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. So it's not a situation where they are stealing from others or taking advantage of Delmarva customers. They have to go out and acquire their own power. I would also note that with respect to the substitute ordinance, I know it was said that this is not about Project Washington, but really the first whereas clause would say different. So, I would ask, in closing, that the planning board keep the record open for some period of time after tonight, so that there is an opportunity to provide additional comments, as the substitute was just released a couple of days ago, and there hasn't been a significant amount of time to really delve into it and respond. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening, my name's Tom Young, I live in the St. George 100 area, right below the canal, and with the guardrails that we're talking about, one thing I'd like to have some real strong language in regards to is the water, where the massive amount of water consumption that can go along with this project. We've already in the Middletown area of St. George where they put additional water towers in. That's been drawing pretty hard on the aquifer, and if all of a sudden these things get fouled with brackish water, a lot of homes just have the low level wells. I live in the Middletown area before the farmers started planting houses, and we're relying substantially on these low water groundwater wells. And we do have to be very concerned that some projects like this will have guardrails in place to keep our drinking water safe. And if they do foul them out, they need to replace them for us, not stick the homeowners and the residents with the bills. So with that in mind, I'll just let it go with the water, but as a caveat to what I heard tonight, we all were required to drive electric cars with power use. Thank you.
Good evening. Joe Fitzgerald here on behalf of the Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce. Read into the record a few excerpts from a letter being submitted by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce, the Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce, Delaware Contractors Association, and ABC Delaware. Our organizations are concerned this ordinance sends the wrong message, not just to the data center industry, but to the broader business community by singling out one sector, particularly a sector that is increasingly important in the context of global, national, and regional economic competitiveness. For unnecessary and unduly robust regulation which extends well beyond the jurisdiction of the county as it relates to land use. In addition to the concerns expressed above, we also note the concerning language in section 9 of the draft substitute under effective date, which would make the provisions of the ordinance retroactive. Not only is such retroactivity a departure from Council Rule 2.2 and the general practice in Newcastle County pertaining to land units, it would have the effect of significantly diminishing regulatory certainty, which would have implications across sectors and impact decision making with regard to investment and economic development, both within this sector of the economy and across sectors. We substantially agree with everything that's been said by Scott and others who have concerns about this legislation. And as written, our organization oppose. We look forward to discussing this further with Councilman Carter and his colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Hello, my name is Nadia Fleming and I'm from Wellington.
I'm here today to thank the legislators that have been working hard to create legislation and guardrails to protect their constituents and the environment, but implore them and the board to listen to their constituents when we say that it's not enough and that the center is not wanted. Only 3% of Earth's water is fresh water, and only 0.5% of all water is accessible and safe for human consumption. Increasing drought combined with unchecked population growth and consumption are increasing water shortages and reducing water availability. The UNEP and Global Commission on the Economics of Water have warned that global freshwater demand will outstrip supply by 40% by 2030 if current trends continue. This looming water scarcity crisis is expected to affect almost half of the world's population, impacting everything from food security to economic growth. Meanwhile, data centers like the one proposed nearby are increasingly tapping into surface and underground aquifers to cool their facilities. Larger data centers can each drink up to 5 million gallons per day, or about 1.8 billion annually, usage equivalent to a town of 10,000 to 50,000 people. This allocation of water is unsustainable and undeniably just plain dumb. Many citizens around the country living near data centers are quickly facing the devastating consequences of legislators allowing mega corporations to swoop in. Some can't flush their own toilets or run water from their kitchen sinks without fear of what will or will not come out. With water being a finite resource that all living beings need to survive, I'm going to ask the board to consider these words from Aurora Gomez. Neither people nor data can live without water, but human life is essential and data is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 11 people online. So we have a Randy H44. Can you, you should be allowed to be able to speak online now. Can you please state your name for the record? Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on.
I'm here. I want,
Speak for the record.
my name for the record is Randy Henrick, Henrick. Reason for, I think we've heard a lot of good comments tonight for the need to put guardrails around a large infrastructure project such as this data center. The ordinances that are currently in place never contemplated the needs of these type of environmentally questionable operations. We need to have the owners and the developers of these units be responsible for their own energy, their own water, and not adversely affect the community through increased costs and expenses, and possibly, as somebody mentioned earlier, the likelihood of rolling brownouts. So I think this ordinance goes a good ways towards doing that. I commend Councilman Carter for introducing it, and for the reasons that have been expressed here tonight, I want to offer my support and my family's support for it as well. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Marshala Lee McCall. You should be able to speak.
Yes, good evening. My name is Dr. Marshala Lee McCall, and I am a local family medicine physician, public health researcher, climate and health equity fellow, and a member of the Mid-Atlantic Alliance on Climate and Health. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight in strong support of the proposed ordinance regulating data center development in Newcastle County. As a physician, I've seen how air pollution, noise, heat exposure, and poor water quality directly impact the health of my patients. Data centers are extremely energy and water intensive, often relying on backup generators that can increase local emissions and worsen air quality. Without strong regulations, these facilities can also strain local utilities and increase costs for nearby residents and taxpayers. This ordinance closes critical regulatory gaps by ensuring that data centers are built with clear standards for energy efficiency, emissions control, water conservation, and community transparency. It's about protecting residents from the unintended consequences of rapid industrial expansion and making sure progress benefits everyone. As a member of the Mid-Atlantic Alliance on Climate and Health, I can tell you that our region is already seeing the health effects of global warming. Higher asthma rates, worsening heat stress, and more frequent flooding. We cannot afford to add to that burden through unchecked development. By passing this ordinance, Newcastle County can lead the nation in showing how to balance innovation with public protection. This is an opportunity to model responsible growth that safeguards our air, water, and the health of every family in our community. I urge us to support this ordinance and recommend its passage to the full County Council. Doing so affirms our shared commitment to both progress and public well-being. Thank you for your time and for your dedication to protecting the health and future of Newcastle County.
Thank you, Dr. Call.
Next, we have Connor Delaware. Please state your name for the record. Connor, you should be able to speak now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Connor Brophy. I use they, them pronouns, and I live just up the road in Wilmington Manor. I just want to take a step back and say, first and foremost, this data center project is creating a solution to a problem that we do not have. This project is meant to line the pockets of the large corporations that have stolen our land, our wellness, and our wealth, and that anyone supporting it and making it easier to have this project move forward is an enemy to your future and is intentionally harming future generations. The fact that this data center has made it this far in the process means the people in power and our current ordinances have already failed us. I support these guidelines and demand that the county makes even more stringent guidelines to follow to make it the continuation of this project impossible. Because once this data center is built, no one's going to be able to stop them from doing measurable harm to Delawareans. And even after they do this irreparable harm to us, they'll only ever face minuscule fines and settlements while they continue chewing up all our resources. We need to set a guidelines that ensure that a rapid growth of technology is building towards a responsible and sustainable future rather than building a bomb for a one-time score. These data centers are a direct threat to everyone in this room and are going to immediately hurt us now and damn us in the future. We know these facilities poison our water. I've lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and have enjoyed some of the cleanest water in the country from the Gayoso Aquifer, but now the local data center is threatening to leach arsenic into the millennia-old water source. So ask yourselves, how many more Armory Creeks do we need in our backyards? We also know these facilities steal our power. I've also had been grateful to live in Austin, Texas, but unfortunately, I saw the fallout of what a failing power grid does and the fatal result to our elderly and vulnerable family members and community. Imagine carrying the trauma of losing your family due to a power outage, knowing that the state's only answer is minuscule fees and scheduling blackouts while having the dueling demand for power of these mega facilities. We also know these facilities poison our air. We already have one of the most poisoned sections of land in the country in the Route 9 corridor. Data facilities only have negative health outcomes and consequences, and by not holding these companies to account, we are bartering our future generations and the lives of our children for a nominally better chatbot and giving the people the ability to create deep fakes of our neighbors. And we also know these facilities destroy our environments as well. We've heard from so many people already about how these data centers are cancers to us, but they will also kill everything that makes Delaware physically beautiful to live in. The poisoned air, polluted water, and the droning nightmare of these churning computers is going to drive out all of our local animals, disrupt any migratory species we enjoy, and kill off some of the most precious plants that we've been grateful to enjoy every day and every season while living in Delaware. So I urge everyone else to support these ordinances and also demand for more stringent ones in the future. Thank you.
We have Christina online. Christina, you should be able to speak. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Give me just a sec. My name is Christina Panza. I'm from Wilmington. And first, I just wanted to say, while I really appreciate the online option today, The audio has been pretty difficult to hear, both from the presentation and the discussion and questions. So I just wanted to recommend to the county or whoever is doing the IT tonight to maybe wire the microphones directly into the feed, because I think I missed a really interesting conversation at the beginning. Second, I am really impressed by fellow residents across Newcastle County who came out with citations, concerns, research, model legislation from other states like Ohio, lessons learned from Virginia, and we just heard Tennessee and Texas. It's really cool to be a part of a county and a state where people care, where people show up on a Tuesday night, and where people like bring a lot of facts. I only hope that all the lawmakers that are involved with this process at all levels are listening to the overwhelming message that's been brought by constituents tonight. Third, I just want to say thank you to Councilman Carter for your proactive attention and research, breaking down during your presentation the different categories of regulations and identifying things that needed to be changed. Fourth, I just wanted to say, I wanted to highlight some of my own concerns that are addressed by this ordinance, and I would also be in support of even further regulation in these areas. So as other people have said, energy rates have been increasing pretty significantly. There's a backlog of infrastructure. We don't have enough energy for the county and the state. Costs are going up, and I think considering what that means environmentally and financially to Delmarva, the geographic region, not the company, is really important for both policy and code. And so I hope that both this ordinance, future ordinances, and future policies continue to address that so that there is no impact for any sort of large scale data venture. Again, not against the idea of data, but what it costs financially and ecologically to those of us who live here. Second, I also wanted to highlight the environment. We have had, in particular, 2 really, really hot, really dry summers. Our friends in northern East Coast, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, most of New England is having one of the driest summers in 100 years with record lows. And I think considering, again, the heat, the water use, and the environmental impact is an ongoing concern. Finally, I just wanted to summarize and say that I am in support of this ordinance and further regulation, and I appreciate all additional efforts to protect our community from heat, sound, water misuse, pollution, and non-sustainable energy. I think this always begs the question of what is a world with AI and no flowers and butterflies? Thank you.
Right, next we have Jake Walls. Jake Walls, you should be unmuted now.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse, that's why I'm not there in person. I'm up in Pike Creek, like I said, my name is Jacob Walls. Shout out Frank Burns, I know you're there. And I'm obviously in support of this ordinance. I think it's just kind of a duh situation. Like, we're going to have to come up with some sort of well-tailored solution to the data center problem. But something to also keep in mind is when we're talking about situations like energy storage on site, backup generators, and potentially energy creation on site, these data centers grow with time. This new data center that's going to be potentially going in as a 1.2 gigawatt data center. The physical processors that they use in these data centers eventually become obsolete. And when they upgrade them, it's going to cause more draw on the power grid. So any legislation that we put forth to help kind of curtail the effects on the grid are going to have to take into account the increased draw on the grid in the future that these things are going to have. That's all I needed to say, and thank you for letting me speak.
Right, Rob Bullock. Rob Bullock, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, hello everyone. All we got is this ordinance, but I feel as though we can do better. The technological advancements that will be made in 20 years or less will render these data centers obsolete. So what's the rush? The point is, why here, why now, why this area? Don't we have enough HI in our communities? Put it in Greenville, an affluent area. I know everybody will laugh because that will never happen. The polluters have gotten away with murder. We got Cancer Alley, forever chemicals in our water. They want to disturb and dredge the river to expand the Eddystone Port. They want to kill us slowly to make fast money. Ask yourself one question. Does this greatly benefit us or the developers, the private equity firms? We want environmental reparations to repair the damage that's already been done. New Jersey got 10 billion from DuPont. Pennsylvania got 20 billion. Where's our environmental reparations? Our kids is bigger than us. Our kids will ask one day, how did this happen? Who let it happen? It's our responsibility to not let this happen in its current form. We want environmental justice now, not 10 years from now, not 20 years from now. Repair what the damage you have already caused to the environment along the Route 9 corridor now.
So we have Imbak Ye. Should be able to speak now. Hello, Imbak Ye. You should be able to speak. You are unmuted. Okay, we'll move on to the next person. We have a Stephanie Malleus.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Sorry, microphone issue.
oh, okay, yes, and let's, all right, this is, can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Inbokya, and I'm a resident of Newark, Delaware, and someone who graduated from the University of Delaware. And I'm here to speak my concern about this data center. Now, everyone has mentioned the environmental impact that these data centers had, but I also have an extra concern, which is an economic one, because I mean, here's the thing: this data center is being built to prop up this whole AI economy, right? But here's the thing. First of all, I feel like AI does not, so far, they do not have like a sustainable revenue generation scheme. And it feels like it's all being propped up by a bubble. So what I'm wondering is like, what is, if we build this data center and then eventually the big economic bubble pops, what's going to happen, right? Like, are we all going to be all saddled with all these different issues along with the environmental one? So I don't know. I'm not an economic major or anything, but I'm really concerned about the fact that the moment they build it, it could, or the AI fad could already pass. I mean, AI is not going away because I mean that Pandora's box has been opened, but like that previous like cheap AI, the ability to cheaply, produce AI stuff. I mean, that might not be permanent. So I don't know. I say we should at least wait a long while before this whole thing comes about. And also I support this ordinance and just like some other people before, I support even stricter ordinance so we can prevent the data center from being created. Thank you.
Okay, Stephanie Malleus.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Dr. Stephanie Malleus. I'm a member of the Sierra Club and also of the Mid-Atlantic Alliance for Climate and Health. And I'm speaking in favor of releasing the ordinance for consideration by the Newcastle County Council. Good government requires setting some level of reasonable health, property, and environmental requirements to protect the surrounding inhabitants and to avoid making Delaware an easy target for ill-conceived projects. Health concerns associated with low frequency sound waves, exacerbation of heart and lung issues contingent on the burning of diesel fuel, and concerns that residents have with the use of hydrogen on site are addressed in this ordinance. Additionally, depletion of clean water and available energy and electrical grid capacity are also addressed. I would urge you to please release this ordinance for careful and further consideration by the citizens and by the Newcastle County Council. Thank you.
We have, they have named him as strategic partner. You can speak now. Please state your name for the record.
This is Paul Tiedemann, Bayview Manor, 19720. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So I don't know a whole lot. You've got some bad audio. I kind of missed the beginning parts of I guess it was Councilman's speech on what the ordinance was all about. So I'm not too sure about that ordinance, but I'm hearing a lot. I've been on this call for over 2 hours now, almost 2.5 hours. And it sounds like there's an overwhelming support to move forward with this project, but there's a few people that are a little concerned about the water. And I just want to tell you, they don't need clean water. They can use whatever water is available to them. They'll take it right out of your toilet. And for those that have some concerns about the noise, I work on the highway, and I can tell you that that's a pretty loud road to be built next to, and I don't think anybody's going to hear anything over top of that. So I'm not exactly sure what the ordinance is all about, but I would hope that we stop scaring away businesses and we start letting people build here. And for those people that say, well, what if the project goes, south, and I guess we'll have our power situation figured out, and the building will close up and somebody else will move in there. So I'm all for just letting them build. Obviously, you got to have a few safeguards in place, but less regulation and allow them to maybe have them build a battery in, but it sounds like some of these ordinances are a little bit out of whack. So I live right down the street. I'm not concerned. I look forward to the project, and I hope the rest of the room there is in favor. Sounds like most people are, and that's it.
Next speaker, Val Gould. Val Gould, you should be able to speak now. Val, you should be unmuted now. Okay, let's move on to the next speaker. We have Matthew Sarver. Matthew Sarver, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Hi, my name is Matt Sarver. I'm a conservation biologist and a restoration ecologist by trade. I'm a resident of the county, a birder, and a current conservation chair of the Delaware Ornithological Society. There's a tremendous amount of environmental impact associated with a project at this scale, as we've heard tonight, starting with the loss of farmland and rural character in sites that are potentially large enough to accommodate such a project. Every acre of farmland and habitat loss in Delaware is critical. Habitat loss through development has historically been one of the biggest drivers of declines of species across the state. I also want to point out when it comes to noise, while residential properties are clearly very important, they're not the only concern. Studies have indicated hormonal changes and reduced nestling, feather development, and body size in bluebirds at noise levels above about 70 decibels. Recent research has also shown that there are synergistic effects of nighttime light pollution as well as noise on a variety of bird species. Delaware has significant responsibility as part of the Atlantic Flyway. So there's a migratory bird concern as well. We don't know exactly what the impact of a data center like this one might be on breeding and migratory stopover of birds in the adjacent forests and marshes, but it's likely not going to be a positive one. The number of threats to bird species in North America, the number one threat, is climate change. And it's my belief that it's wildly irresponsible for us to encourage doubling of the existing energy consumption in Delaware for what is in effect a luxury consumer use when we're struggling to protect our communities and ecosystems from the current effects of climate change. I also sit on the Newcastle County Open Space Advisory Board. And as part of that, I know the county has been trying admirably to protect and preserve open space that local communities desperately want and depend upon. However, no amount of land conservation will be effective if the continued effects of climate change render our forests dead and wildlife gone. This is not hypothetical. It's happening as we speak with things like beech leaf disease and other forest pathogens exacerbated by climate impacts. I also serve as the chair of Delaware's Native Species Commission, which is tasked with mitigating extinction of rare species in Delaware. Climate change and sea level rise are one of the top threats facing the majority of species of conservation concern in the state. With regard to the cooling system issues, we already have a massive cooling system in the river at Salem, which has caused impingement and entrainment of massive amounts of aquatic life like juvenile striped bass, other migratory fish species. We have endangered.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Not to mention the thermal impacts of a potential cooling source. Our freshwater and aquifer resources are even more limited and imperiled than our tidal resources. And what happens when aquifers and groundwater resources are depleted, as other commenters have mentioned, potentially dewatering adjacent marshes and freshwater wetlands, not to mention private drinking water wells. So closed loop cooling is really a vital aspect of any proposed project. Newcastle County needs to put significant guardrails on any project promising such massive impacts. We owe it to the legacy of Governor Russ Peterson, Ted Harvey, and other early champions of the conservation of Delaware's coastal zone and precious natural resources to carefully consider the issue before the board, and I fully support the ordinance proposed by Councilman Carter. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker, Jessica Screen. Jessica Screen, you should be able to unmute now.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Scarain. I live in Wilmington, and I just want to thank council members Carter, Kaneko, Toole, Durham, Cartier for bringing this ordinance forward. In the interest of time, I think everyone who has spoken before me in support of it has made incredible, thoughtful points. And I recommend that or request that the planning board move this ordinance forward so that we can discuss it in front of the full council. That's all. Thank you so much.
Next speaker, Ellen Finney. Ellen Finney, you should be able to speak now.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ellen Finney. Thank you for proposing this ordinance and doing all the legwork to get this started. I think it's a very important piece of regulation that we need that doesn't exist at this time, especially given the scale of the data centers, the environmental impacts, including the impact on migratory species. I mean, even the Buc-ee's they built down in South Carolina recently has caused the sea turtles to go to the wrong way because the light pollution is so much. So I think there are risks that we don't even know yet about a data center this big. I really appreciate the guardrails on the sound. I think that could be increased in distance since you had 1 to 2 miles in there, but settled on 1,000 feet. So I think maybe that should be looked at, as we do know low frequency noise can harm things that we don't hear. Also, I think given the amount of money these organizations have, they should be able to provide their own clean energy source and should not be pulling off of our grids and increasing our prices. I don't know why that's even a question and why we are even allowing them to use our energy to make their money and then charging us for it. So I think that should be a really strong point we have in there. Also, I didn't see anything about the size of the data center and any regulation to that. So I feel like there should be something with language about like how much energy they would use per size or something, some sort of regulation on the size. So they just can't keep expanding into our backyards. And then I think just the environmental aspects overall. I mean, when you think about rolling blackouts, that's when you have higher ER visits because patients rely on the energy in their home to run their medical devices. When you have poor air quality, you know, camps during the summer, this past summer, they had to go inside because the air quality was so bad some days. And that is so risky for children. So I just think, you know, we can't just let them do whatever they want with our land, our nature, our environment, our citizens. And so I really appreciate this ordinance and I think it moves forward. with your support. Thank you.
Great. Our next person in line is Coralie Pride. You should be able to speak now, Coralie. Coralie Pride. Okay, we'll move.
Unmuted now?
Oh, you're good. Yes, yes, we can
Okay,
hear
we
you.
seem to go back and forth there, but Coralie Pride, I've been a volunteer environmentalist for almost the past 30 years. As such, I'm very cognizant of all the issues with water pollution, air pollution, and noise pollution that affects so many people, and particularly those in environmental justice communities. But still, I think my overall biggest concern is the use of electricity. I was listening to WHYY today, and they mentioned that by 2030, they expected that data centers would be using 7% of all the energy produced. And they said, well, that would be very disruptive. My very quick calculation here is with the largest proposed energy use, this data center would be using something like 48% of the energy used in Delaware. That seems to go way beyond disruptive. Possibly the Beyonce solution is the best, that they really need to bring their own clean energy, because it's going to be very, very hard to see how it's going to be balanced out on a grid that's already short of electricity. I also today I listened about there may be a bubble in the use of artificial intelligence, in which case data centers would become have too many on the market and too many empty ones. So that is a concern, despite what the representatives for the company think, that we're just going to have data centers that aren't in use anymore. In any case, I do support these regulations that Mr. Carter and others have worked on, and I believe that there may also be ways that they can strengthen more. So I strongly support them, and making sure that they truly fill all the cracks that things could get through. Thank you for all your work.
Next we have just name listed as Nancy. You should be able to unmute. Please state your name for the record. Nancy, you should be able to speak. Nancy, are you there?
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, could you speak? Could you state your name for the record?
Yeah, this is Nancy Willing from Newark, Delaware. Thanks for the community that came out tonight. Most of the comments that I could hear were very informative, very direct, and frightening in some ways. I missed the first part of the meeting, and if by accounts, it seems like the audio was poor. The one gentleman was so confused, he thought that we were all in support of the project itself, but this is indeed support for ordinance 25-101 data center controls, and I'm very much in support of the ordinance. And I also would appreciate if indeed the audio is pretty poor, that the land use department has always been very cooperative to send a digital transcript once that's prepared. So that would be appreciated. I think a lot of people would really want to be able to read the transcript if we can't really get to the audio, if we can't really decipher the audio. So good points there, as well as thanks to Miss Pam Scott for asking for the 30-day extension. I think we probably all would appreciate that. So thank you. And please, the planning board, please consider positive recommendations for this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Yeah, next we have John Irwin. John Irwin, you should be able to speak.
Hi there. My name's John Irwin,
This ordinance is important to set the guardrails around this exploding demand for data centers. We need it now to ensure the public is protected from health and financial risks. We know this project may be the first of many and need to get in front of it to set the rules before things get out of hand. So it needs to be backdated to the time of introduction. These data centers are a new kind of development and they need to be thought about so that they can be safely built with protections for the neighboring communities. This ordinance has sensible conditions, not too close to vulnerable people, sound restricted to safe levels, prevents lighting from bothering neighbors, includes best practices for water use, and emissions controls and battery storage for power generation. Because of the extraordinary amount of power demanded, these projects should be working with utilities to not adversely affect the grid or raise energy costs for ratepayers. It would be ideal that they would have to produce their own clean power, but I know that's not part of the ordinance. But please support this ordinance going on to the full council on its merits. Thank you.
Next we have someone labeled as Zoom user. You should be able to speak now. You're labeled as Zoom user. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, could you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Mike Jones. I'd like to say a few things regarding the proposed data center. A lot of people have talked about the sound being caused by the generators and cooling towers. I've worked on a lot of critical infrastructure myself within the 17 years of being in the electrical trades, and the generators that are coming out nowadays are very quiet and fuel efficient. If you drive by a lot of the data centers that are already existing in Delaware, you're not going to hear the noise pollution that a lot of previous commenters have spoke on, saying they're going to be very loud. And a lot of these data centers are also located by frequent highways that you have a lot of road traffic. I think you hear the road noise more than you even hear the data center, and you probably wouldn't even know where these data centers are located. That's all.
And lastly, Val Gould. Val Gould, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, please. Yeah, I was in here earlier, and I think when you tried to unmute me, I got kicked out. So had to go back to the end of the line here. My name is Val Gould. I live in Wilmington, and up until very recently, I worked for the DNREC State Energy Office, where my primary responsibility was researching data usage surrounding data centers, nuclear energy, renewable energy, and a lot of related topics. And I wanted to make a few comments, especially knowing that there are some state elected folks in the room. Firstly, there is not a gigawatt of energy to be had on our grid. This data center thinks it's going to tap into what's coming over from Salem. Salem itself is a 1 gigawatt generator. It supplies a massive amount of energy to southern New Jersey. There is not a gigawatt of energy to be had from that. So that is problematic. That means that these generators that they are claiming are going to be backups will likely be run quite often to supply energy to the data center, much like they are in South Memphis with X's Colossus data center, which is running 37 methane generators 24/7 to run their data center because they don't have transmission and they don't have generation. So that's what they're using. These generators are causing people to develop and die from COPD within 1.5 to 2 years. Also, the low frequency sounds that people are talking about cannot be blocked. They cannot be blocked. It is a matter of physics. They are too low frequency and travel at too slow a rate to be blocked by any human erected structure. Also, I wanted to mention that one of the former commenters, who's a land use attorney, said that data centers have to go out and procure their power on the market. That is true. However, when there isn't enough energy to be had, the AI data centers demands drive up our prices, which is extremely problematic for most Delawareans at this point. A couple of other people said that data centers are not profitable, and that is accurate. They are pouring billions and billions of dollars into this, and they are not making a return on their investment. So the comments about a potential bubble are probably pretty well founded. Low frequency noise and pollution health effects. I mean, besides from the burning of natural gas and generators, thank you. The low frequency noise can increase occurrences of depression and anxiety, not to mention other physical ailments. And honestly, like, we are a small state. We cannot accommodate a load like this. And I know that we're a by right state, but I'm hoping some state elected leaders listening to all of this tonight understand that we need to make adjustments to our by right law so that we have more teeth to fight back against developments like this that are harmful to our communities. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is all for online to the comment.
Councilman Carter, a few questions. All right, still awake.
I had a 16-ounce bottle of coffee on my way. I wanted to talk a little bit about the sound designs. I've overseen a lot of science, a lot of studies, used a lot of technology, chirps on all kinds of stuff in the bay, land-based stuff. And what I learned, particularly when I went back and got my doctoral degree, is that quantitative data alone isn't always the best way to do it. You need to use both quantitative and qualitative. And if you look at some of the case studies that have been done in Loudon County, in Santa Rosa, in California, and community responses, different people respond with different sensitivities, particularly low frequency, and we need to really get beyond it. I understand every developer wants to say, I want to use this number and this piece of equipment, and maybe it picks it up and maybe it doesn't. But there are better ways to do it that are more protective of the community, and we need to do both. We need to do those modern methods, good technical research. That's what good scientists do, and I think we want to have something based in science. So I don't agree with the comments on the DVC, but I'm happy to look. And the other method he recommends is one that, at least the technical equipment, I looked at that one. It's fine. It's easy. I use DVA and DVC because that's collected by most people already, and it's when we did the sampling in Newark years ago when they were considering PowerPoint, we hit or PowerPoint, we looked at it. A good comment on Health and Social Services. I did not think to ask Dave Edgell from the state to look at that. I will ask him, having worked on the Cancer Consortium, it's difficult to find that type of nexus, but it's worth asking. I'm very familiar with the Ohio case. I actually work with NACO with some of the Ohio folks. That's something that I will talk about. Some of our state legislators, local legislators, although in the House bill and the Senate bill, they're trying to get at some of that. Maybe not the 85% requirement, but they are working with that. That's not something the county can do. That would have to be under Title 29 with the Public Service Commission. I do want to address Ms. Scott's comments on regulation versus over regulation and comprehensiveness of the UDC. It was very comprehensive. We have the most comprehensive and strongest land use code in the county, but it never, ever contemplated these new scale data centers with the chips and power requirements and cooling requirements that we're now dealing with. We have data centers, we've had them for a long time, but they're an old style, quite different from what we're dealing with. The code didn't anticipate them, it's not included in it, it's not there. I understand, you may not understand what's in the code. I don't personally think it's legally that complex. And you're happy to call me. I know I have calls, I know DNS called, and I will probably tell you the same thing I told them. I'm not really good at the Delaware way of doing things one-on-one behind the scenes. They're gonna have a forum. I'm happy to do a forum with whatever group, if other people are allowed to come in from the public, because I think this is a public policy, and a lot of our discussion should be done in public. It's just a way you need to do it. I'm a little concerned, with the comments about, do you want to you wanted to talk to me about, any of you are welcome to call me. So far, there's only been 4 people contacting with the specific. Penrose Hollins, in response to Sean Tucker, having some questions on zoning and some changing DNS and the Sierra Club. You're all welcome to call me. I will explain what I want. If you want to have a forum, I'm happy to come talk to that. Let's do it openly. Let's do it publicly. What has been happening and why you got the secondary information of my intent was because I'm getting a lot of secondhand information from other council members, from people in planning, and from everyone else that are being contacted by land use attorneys and others who aren't contacting me. And that might be that most of you know me. I tend to be very direct, sometimes harshly direct. I will tell you exactly what's on my mind and tell you what's there. And maybe the reason I haven't been directly called is because it's more advantageous from a lobbying perspective to spread rumors that aren't accurate. And we need to get that cleaned up. We need to get that cleaned. The generation issue, I can tell you in Virginia, because of some of the grid issues, they are running much more. The backup is becoming a much longer time span and what have you. I am happy to entertain any comments that will make this legislation better, make it more workable. That goes to all sides of it. I welcome that, and we will do it, but I do not support going beyond Friday for public comments. I think we need to deal with this issue quickly, and if we have work out as much as we can, we will have the other opportunity through county council for more comments. But I think we need to get things in place now, even if we have to amend them a little bit later. I just think it's that important that we can't let this thing get away from us. We have to work on it. So I ask that you do not extend it beyond Friday. Thank you.
The Senate board rules say the records until Friday.
How would you feel about a week extension?
We have the work session in 2 weeks, so we still, if you have public comment, we to incorporate into the report, we would do it sooner than after the report is ready. So by Friday should be sufficient for us.
Okay. Keep things moving. Go ahead. Yep. So that shows us the first item on the agenda. I think since most of them probably came for Chris, the data centers, take a 5-minute break to allow anybody to leave or use the restroom for this. Before we start with the second and final item. Okay, we'd like to call the meeting back to order.
Okay, I'll read in the second application for tonight, application 2025-0424-8. Ordinance 25-094, changes to open space or common facilities. Text amendment to amend Newcastle County Code, Chapter 40, Unified Development Code, Section 40.27.540, changes to open space or common facilities regarding proposed plan changes. Can I go?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your hard work, and I know it's been a long night, so I don't think this will take as long. But let me just talk about ordinance 25-094, which is legislation brought forward in which me and Ms. Dorn are sponsoring. And essentially what this does is amends chapter 40 to allow changes to open space for common facilities within developments. So currently, a petition needs 2/3 of lot owners to change open space. However, under the current code, it could just be those folks who live in the community and also the lots that you see associated.
So let's say you have 200 lots and there's only 60 people living in the community. That means that the other 140 lots by the developer get a vote in the petition to change the open space requirements. So it's actually pretty straightforward. What we're trying to do is say occupied lots, not by owners, but by homeowners, need to bring a petition forward to allow changes to open space requirements. That's the current law right now. How we're looking at it is we just feel that, loopholes, as we all know, anybody who lived in this county for a minute, loopholes shouldn't get a vote. Homeowners should get a vote. And let me just give you an example of kind of genesis how this happens. In Bayberry North, we had this issue in which they were trying to change the open space requirements to basically take down an old farmhouse and put eight more houses in there. And they tried for months and months and months to get this done. And what we realized is that the majority of homeowners actually weren't getting a vote. It was because the developer owned certain lots. So legislation is pretty straightforward. There's not too many changes outside of saying that actual people who live in the community should get votes on how they petition to get changes in open space. Not a developer who just owns a bunch of lots that he hasn't built. I mean, that is the quick rundown and summary of this. So I think it's pretty common sense. I've spoken to many people about this. Many folks have come up to me and said, absolutely, Kevin, we think this makes sense. We've had issues in other communities with this arising. And I didn't have one person come to me outside the, maybe one person, a couple people in the development community and say, yeah, we oppose this. Because I think people should be able to have a say in what their community's open space requirements have changed and how they're changed, and not because, a developer could possibly be a bad actor and want to change it based on his open space requirements. So with that, I'll go open the floor to questions because like I said, it's, as you see, it's only 52 lines in the ordinance. So that is basically what the ordinance is. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just curiosity, obviously be a pretty low likelihood, but what about a situation of a property owner that leases the house? I mean, I guess the owner gets the vote then, right? Not the leaseholder.
As I interpret the law right now, the owner of the lot gets the.
Okay. Thank you.
But that is a very good point.
Just a quick question, in the current, code. I didn't understand how the developer gets, does he get one vote? Or does he get a vote for every lot?
Gets a vote for every lot.
Okay, that wasn't clear when you spoke, so I want to make sure that we understood that.
Okay.
So if you've got 60 homeowners, 40 open lots and 100 lots community, the developer gets 40.
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
But what mechanism would you use to curtail the developer's ability to vote? Would it be like the home has to have an occupancy permit to prevent the developer from getting a vote for half-built homes or things like that, or?
Yes, so under line 40 within the legislation right now, after speaking to our council, it says the occupied lots. So essentially that means if somebody's living in the house, they get a vote. If it's a half open, if it's under construction house, they currently do not get a vote.
Mr. Cantrell.
A comment or question. So what this basically does is it gives the power of the vote to the people who are going to be there permanently and not to the developer who's going to be gone sooner or later.
Correct. And we have seen that this issue has arisen in many different developments. in which there's been trying to change open space requirements, and essentially a developer has outvoted the actual community, as you said, Mr. Cantrell, who's going to be there for a very long time. And I currently find that very problematic right now. If people want to make changes to their open space, they can make changes to the open space. There's a process. It's just my belief and Ms. Durham's belief at this time, and other council members as well, that it's the actual people that live in the community that should be able to make that change. That have bought into the community, that have spent their money in the community, that have done all those issues, that should be able to make that change.
Okay. No other questions from the board. Open the floor to the public. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this application or make general comments about it, please come forward. Begin by identifying yourself for the record. Each speaker has 3 minutes.
My name is Jerome Heisler. I've been told I can't talk that long. Thank you for your comments, Councilman. I'm going to be talking to you. I'm Jerome Heisler with Great Wolf Group. I've been in front of the board a number of times. I would like to talk longer tonight, but I can't. I found out about this earlier today. So I'm going to ask for the record to be open to the end of next week, because I'd like to get some documentation on the process of changes that have occurred over the last 25 years for this project, Meridian Crossing. This is the original plan, 700 unit community. It's now 850 units. So I don't have any great pictures up there. Made up of apartments, single families, 2 types of townhomes. And then we upgraded it to semi-detached homes down here, smaller townhomes up here, part rental. And we've actually had to make changes to the open space, but not to create more housing. For stormwater, to relocate some areas that were in conveyance problems with stormwater, and other items related to the function of the open space. The problem is, if I had to go grab 400 signatures, remember it's an 850 unit community, let's say 600 were in there. So I'd get over 400 signatures for it. When it's 600, that'd be impossible. Just isn't going to happen. I can tell you that. They can't get, we own 340 units in that community now. The most they've ever gotten voted on at any open annual meeting is 400 votes. We're 340 votes. There's no participation. People don't want to be involved. I think it's an admirable thought what you want to do, but the reality is it's not going to happen. And even if I want to change an open space and it's mandated, I'm not going to be able to do it by what's been said here. So I want to be really careful with this. I know there's a problem we talked about, and I understand that problem and I want to solve it for you. But there has to be a mechanism for someone like me who isn't going to change open space to develop more lots, but to reconfigure it or maybe swap areas in it to create better facilitating aspects of the community. Mr. Heisler, you got 30 seconds. Oh, darn. You understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to get a report to you guys on it, show you some of the problems, maybe even suggest a potential solution. But this could be detrimental. And if it occurs, I know I would never process another large plan in the community. I don't know that I would do another subdivision plan, I gotta tell you. It's a real disincentive. Thank you.
Could I ask you to?
Sure.
It's now this questions in the board. Could you briefly explain what your suggestions would be?
I think the first thing is a developer should have the right. Maybe there's another plan on here. All right.
Can you use the microphone too, Mr. Heisler?
My voice isn't loud enough.
No,
I
think you're trying to catch it on the recording.
Actually, this is Columbia Place. This is off of the JCC's right over here, the 2 condo buildings here. There's a set of townhomes here, single families in the pink. We decided to reconfigure the condominiums back here and reconfigure this area here. We've been selling homes here and the single families. So the problem is we weren't increasing
the number of units, we've never increased the density. But we changed the open space configuration. We didn't change the amount of open space, we changed how it was configured. So the question is, under this rule, if we didn't get the signatures required from some of the homes up here, we could never have done that, and it would have been a worse plan. So the question is, can you allow better planning? Can you allow better planning and allow with no increased density and not have to go through that headache? If we were going in to manipulate density or take gym equipment and make it half the size or do something that was going to compromise the integrity of the open space, then I need to get signatures. But if I'm just reconfiguring for better stormwater management or facilitating better community parking or some aspect of that, then that's a different story. So there has to be a qualitative analysis done to see if we're making a material and significant change that deters or is a detriment to the overall open space. Just not a blanket statement. You got to get 2/3 signature, which isn't going to happen under any circumstances. In all likelihood, unless there's 3 people in there. By the way, I want to say one thing that happened to me in doing this, because at one point we did have to get signatures on one of our aspects. And there's a very good likelihood somebody's going to say to you, I'd like some cash for this. So I want to be very careful when doing this, because that's going to happen. Some developer's going to say, all right, I'll give you a couple $100. And don't think it won't. Because I had it happen to me and I told the person tax standing. So don't set a code up that's going to be compromising in a situation like that. It will happen. You can understand that, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heisler.
Good evening. It's President Starfer from Terra Vicus Grosso. Keep it short, just basically want to echo what Mr. Heisler said. Reached out to Mr. Konecko this afternoon. Again, it was brief, and I know no real ability between Land Use Committee and this evening for any sort of real dialogue or change. So I appreciate Kevin taking the time and talking with me about it. But as Mr. Heisler mentioned, the about this isn't about adding density and kind of a bait and switch situation. It's about common sense changes for drainage, for grading, for, you know, regular plans that this happens all the time. And you just say you sold one lot, that person could just sit there and there's nothing under this new ordinance that requires them to allow you to make a change. So you either buy this person off or you sell enough lots to, you hope, favorable people. Otherwise, they can just sit there and demand you make other changes to the plan. The other concern that we've gotten from a lot of folks is there's already a state law, the Delaware Uniform Common Interest Act, or the Kiowa, that specifically puts in protections for this sort of situation. And if there are common amenities or open space and it's built and it's shown on the plan and you buy into that community and there are changes, there's state law that controls that. And putting in some sort of regulation that creates a different mechanism, a different standard that is separate from state law and in theory conflicts with state law, you're putting these folks again in a position where, do I violate the state law or do I violate the county law? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Because there are 2 different circumstances and I have to either go and find 400 signatures, as was mentioned, or I have to, you know, I get to vote in the state law situation. And I think it's just either finding some sort of specific carve out in the scenario that Mr. Councilman Konecko specifically identified, or otherwise keeping it the way that it is. Because again, there's just regular routine changes that need to happen for planning to continue to move forward. Otherwise, again, I think to echo what was already said, regular residential subdivision plans are just not going to be able to happen and function in this county.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We have no hands online raised.
Okay. Laura?
I appreciate and understand the concerns that are raised tonight. I did have conversations with folks about this, and I'm happy to have more conversations as we move forward. I can tell you, I have, consulted with my counsel on Title 25. I understand those concerns about possible conflict with state law, but right now, we can't find any case law that actually shows that it does conflict with state law. And it would need to be, litigated out, and we're looking at that, and we're taking a hard look at that, but at this point, there's nothing that says that if we pass this ordinance, it would be in conflict with state law. I would also say that if we're gonna, look at drainage issues, I wish developers would actually take a harder look when they make their actual record plans and submit it to the county about how their drainage plans actually work. Because now they put them in an uncomfortable position where they want to change and make these changes at a whim because they didn't do a proper planning process and actually submit a sufficient record plan. How about that?
That's
So
not right.
I mean, sir,
That's not right. sir.
you're out of order. You're out of order. And so if we look at plans like the Enclave of Odessa, for example, where they put a ridiculous amount of drainage that they don't need, and I'm dealing with people on a daily basis trying to fix their issues because the Capanos didn't know what the hell they were doing, well, maybe submit a good plan. And then I gotta deal with issues in Bayberry North, like I said, where people did abuse the process and did abuse the issues, which they did. Stormwater management is what we're gonna lean on. Good luck with that. I mean, good luck with that. I mean, I have talked to people throughout my district about this and how it works. Every developer is different. Some developers are better than others. But at the end of the day, what the real point matters is what I'm trying to say, is that folks who live in their community should have the vote on how it works. We can look at it more, but that is what we're talking about at the end of the day. Grading, stormwater management, this is all distractions of how the process works. We're talking about significant changes to open space requirements. So I don't even know how you get the grading on an open space requirement. We're talking open space requirements. So I've looked at Title 25 of the Delaware Code very extensively in the last couple of hours and in the last couple, as I have talked about it, and I don't see a violation. And I think this actually tightens up the code and makes it better. So again, we could continue to have a code that I think is not working effectively for homeowners that actually live in there, or we can continue to give votes to loopholes that don't exist. And we have other developments that are becoming, and I'm sorry, sir, I'm sorry. Subdivisions will still get being built in this county because it's a money-making process. So let's stop with that. They're still gonna build subdivision in this county no matter what. You and me both know that. You're only going out of business. Come on.
Am I have to respond?
No, you're not, Councilman, would you have any objection if we extend the record by 2 weeks? Keeping the record open.
I would have extensive objection because you just ruled that Friday was sufficient for the last one.
By council rules, the record stays open in the public hearing until Friday.
So that then concludes the.
Yes. Mixed them if you want.
I make a motion that we extend record a week.
Leave this open for an additional week.
Leave the record open for an additional week.
Do you want to pick a date?
That would be.
The record would be open until the 10th.
by the roll, if you want to make a motion to extend it an additional week would be October 17th.
October 17th.
So for one ordinance, we're gonna do one thing, the other ordinance, we're gonna do a different thing.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
In case, an opportunity to
I don't wanna take any-
submit additional information to be considered. You need a second and then the board just needs to vote on.
Oh, okay, I'll second.
Okay, so the motion is to extend, leave the record open until October 17th. And you can call the question.
All those in favor?
And then all those opposed,
All those opposed? Okay.
so the record will remain open until this Friday.
Right. That concludes the second application on the agenda.
Yeah.
Any comments from the public not relating to anything we discussed? Anything online?
Nothing online.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?